Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're not just learning about ancient Egypt, you're going there, sort of. Just close your eyes, settle into that pillow groove and picture yourself stepping into a sun-soaked land where cats don't just chase mice. They judge your eternal soul. Yeah, you're about to learn why in this time and place, cats were literal gods. And if you ticked one off, you probably wouldn't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and what time it is in the comments. I want to know who else is hanging out in the dark with us tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a bustling street in the middle of ancient Bubastis, the glittering capital of cat worship. The air is thick with incense and that dry heat that gets under your skin. Linen-clad merchants haggle over spices and fish. Scribes hustle between temples with scrolls tucked under their arms, and everywhere there are cats. Not scrawny strays either. Sleek, elegant, practically smirking creatures who move with that casual arrogance like they know they outrank everyone here. One strolls by you now, her coat glinting gold in the sun, ears twitching tail high. The crowd parts. A soldier steps back respectfully. Someone murmurs Bastet under their breath. Not as a name, but almost like a prayer. And just like that, the cat hops onto a platform and lies down like she owns the place, which according to the locals, she absolutely does. You're ushered toward a grand temple, past sandstone pillars carved with feline forms. Inside, the air cools slightly. Soft light filters in through high slits in the walls. The scent here is thicker, frankincense and lotus. It clings to the robes of the priests and the fur of the cats lounging on every surface. One sits atop a golden pedestal, eyes half closed, tail wrapped neatly around her front paws. She is the living embodiment of Bastet, the cat-headed goddess of home, fertility and fierce protection, and everyone's treating her accordingly. A priest bows before her. A noblewoman kneels and offers her a ribbon of raw duck liver. No one speaks above a whisper. You're told without words that this feline, this soft-footed bundle of fluff could, if disrespected, mean your ruin. Not symbolically, literally. Ancient Egyptian law protected cats with more intensity than some people. Accidentally killing one, even if it wandered under your chariot wheel, that was it, game over, public execution. And if it looked like you might hurt a cat, well, best of luck. There's at least one record of a Roman soldier being torn apart by a mob for daring to lay a hand on one. So yeah, you keep your hands tucked safely at your sides. And as you follow a local guide, she explains that cats aren't just animals. They're divine conduits. Each cat, especially those kept in temples, is seen as a part of Bastet herself, a divine fragment in mortal form. They're protectors, healers and intermediaries. When a cat purrs in your direction, it's a sign of favour. When one hisses, someone's done something very, very wrong. You pass a row of statues lining the corridor, and every single one a cat. Some sit regal and upright, carved from polished obsidian. Others stretch mid-pounce, ready to strike. Some even wear golden earrings and painted eyes, giving them an eerie, almost living expression. The symmetry is unsettling, and you can't shake the feeling that a dozen pairs of feline eyes are watching your every move. One quirky detail you notice. Even the mice in this temple stay out of sight. You half expect one to dart across the floor, but it's like they've learned. You later find out that in this temple district, cats are fed so well they don't even bother hunting anymore. They're retired gods, lounging like overpaid celebrities at a resort. Still, the mice haven't taken chances in generations. Your guide stops before a low altar and offers a quiet chant. A cat pads forward from the shadows and curls herself around the guide's ankles. She pauses, waits, then nods. The feline's approval is needed to continue. And you realise this isn't just ritual. This is belief, deep and pulsing in the bones of the people. The cat isn't pretending to be divine, it is divine. In this time, in this place, that's just reality. You learn something else too, something whispered. Bastet wasn't always gentle. Long before she became the elegant, playful protector, she had a wilder side. Scholars still debate how the goddess Sekhmet, lion-headed and bloodthirsty, might have merged with Bastet over time. Was Bastet always dual-natured, both nurturer and destroyer? Or did priests rebrand her to make her more palatable? The murals don't exactly clarify. In one, she's nursing children. In another, she's tearing into a serpent demon's neck. You don't say this out loud, of course, but you start to suspect ancient Egyptians loved cats for the same reason modern folks do. They're adorable. And absolutely terrifying. One moment purring contentedly in your lap, the next claws deep in your hand because you looked at them funny. Perfect material for a goddess. As the sun sets, casting long shadows through the temple, a bell chimes softly. The cats begin to stir, stretching lazily, blinking with slow purpose. The guide explains this is the hour of transition, when day ends and the protective aspect of Bastet fades, replaced by her watchful, warier gaze over the night. Offerings are made, prayers whispered, and one by one the cats take their places at specific points in the temple, forming a living, furry protective circle. You watch in quiet awe, and maybe, just maybe, you start to feel what they felt. That old magic of knowing you're being watched over by something both beautiful and dangerous. Something with fur and fangs and the quiet authority to judge your soul and scratch your face if you step out of line. The next morning you wake up on a reed mat inside a priest's quarters, groggy and warm. A tabby is curled on your chest, purring like a divine engine. Your limbs are stiff, your mouth tastes like incense dust, and somewhere nearby someone's chanting in the ancient Egyptian. You gently move the cat, apologizing out loud just in case, and shuffle toward the temple courtyard where a small crowd is forming. You hear the name Bastet spoken reverently, then again and again layered with ritual cadence. At the centre of the courtyard, a priestess in robes so finely pleated they rustle like papyrus pages stands before an enormous bronze statue. It gleams in the morning sun, tall, sleek, feminine, and crowned with the unmistakable head of a lioness turned house cat. Bastet. But this isn't the soft goddess from last night. Her eyes are narrowed. She clutches a sistrum, an ancient rattle used to summon divine energy, in one hand and a blade in the other. Not a ceremonial dagger either, a real curved, flesh-ripping weapon. You suddenly feel very seized. The chant builds, and that's when you feel it. A low hum, not in your ears, but in your ribs, like something purring inside the stone. It's a little spooky. You glance around. The cats, dozens of them, have all formed a wide, loose circle around the courtyard's edge. They're watching, not blinking, not twitching, just observing. Every tail still, every back arched in subtle readiness. It's like they know this isn't a festival. It's something older, stranger. You suddenly remember that the goddess Bastet wasn't always the feline of silk pillows and nurturing lullabies. Long ago she had another face. The priestess begins to speak, not just in prayer, but in story. You realise this is part of the morning rite. The recitation of Bastet's origins. It's the part the kids growing up here probably hear 1,000 times, until it seeps into their bones. And you're hearing it for the first time. It starts with Ra, the sun god, old and weary, his enemies multiplying on earth. The gods, concerned, begged him to send help, so he plucked an aspect of his own fury, a being made of fire and vengeance, and sent her to earth. That being became Sekhmet. Here's where things take a turn, because Sekhmet didn't just defeat Ra's enemies. She didn't stop. Once her bloodlust was awakened, she hunted anyone and anything, even the innocent, even those who knelt before her. It got so bad that Ra, horrified by what he'd unleashed, had to trick her into stopping. He dyed beer red, made it look like blood, and poured it across the land. Sekhmet drank, grew dizzy, and fell asleep. When she woke up, she was changed, mellowed. Her wrath replaced with something gentler. That's when she became Bastet. But here's the thing, not everyone agrees on that version. Some scholars say Bastet and Sekhmet were always separate. Others think they were twin sisters. Some even claim that Bastet was just Sekhmet in a better mood, like the same storm wearing different weather. There are ancient texts that contradict each other outright, and archaeologists have spent decades trying to untangle the mess. But the people in this temple, they don't need it untangled, they live in the tangle. The priestess lifts her sistrum and begins to shake it gently. The bells ring out, clear and metallic, cutting through the heat. The cats stand in unison, every single one. Their tails rise like banners. They begin walking slowly towards the statue. You step back without thinking, because you don't want to get in the way of what's happening. They form a spiral weaving in and around each other, until the base of the statue is encircled in living fur. It's mesmerising. and vaguely threatening. Then something unexpected happens. A boy, barefoot, no more than 6 or 7, accidentally stumbles forward, trips, lands at the edge of the cat spiral. Everyone gasps. One of the temple guards raises a hand instinctively, and you freeze. You've been here long enough to know that harming a cat, even accidentally, is punishable by death. What happens next could be a disaster. But the cats, they don't attack. One breaks the circle and walks to the boy. She sniffs his foot. He doesn't move. Another joins her, then another. Soon the boy's surrounded, but gently. One cat nudges his chin up, another brushes against his shoulder. And just like that, the tension dissolves. The priestess lifts a hand and speaks again. Something about forgiveness and divine balance. You don't catch every word, but the message is clear. Bastet is watching, and today she's merciful. But the feeling that lingers isn't relief. It's a weird, tight awe, because even though the boy is safe, you know that moment could have gone very differently. There's an edge here, beneath all the purring and graceful lounging. These cats may look pampered, but they remember their origins. So do the people. Later that day, back inside the temple halls, you talk with an older scribe named Renef. His fingers are ink-stained, and there's a cat asleep in his lap as he works. He explains, without even pausing his writing, that cats are seen as both guardians and warnings. They walk between the worlds. Their eyes, he says, reflect more than the light. A cat can see into your care, he murmurs, tapping your chest. Your spirit. If it hisses, it's not at you, it's at something inside you. You try to laugh, but it catches in your throat. He smiles slightly without looking up, and if you ever see one watching the wall, unmoving for hours, don't ask what it sees. You glance over at the cat in his lap. It opens one eye, just one, and for a second you feel very, very seen. That evening, just after twilight, you find yourself following a winding procession out of the main temple complex and toward a low hill beyond the city walls. The moon is rising like a pale eye above the palms, and the desert air has cooled just enough to make your skin feel pleasantly chilled. The crowd moves in silence. Everyone carries something small. Flowers, jars of honey, incense, even scraps of cooked fish wrapped in linen. Offerings. You still aren't sure for what. At the top of the hill is a squat stone structure, half buried in sand and flanked by 2 statues of Bastet, their carved eyes lined with dark pigment that gives them a living sharpness. The doorway is low, and you duck to enter, brushing past curtains of beads and smoke. Inside, the air is thick, almost chewy, with resin and thyme. A priest lights a small brazier and gestures for silence. And then you see them. Lined up in niches that ring the room are dozens, no hundreds, of tiny mummies, not human, feline. Their linen wrappings are precise, delicate, their forms unmistakable. Each one has a small painted face, some calm, some playful, some frozen in a snarl. You feel your breath catch in your throat. It's like walking into a library of the dead, but every book is a cat. The priest speaks softly, his voice echoing off the stone. This is a cat necropolis, a sacred resting place. The mummified cats here are not just pets, they're sacred emissaries, each one offered to Bastet in devotion. People came from all over Egypt to leave offerings, hoping the cats would carry their prayers straight to the goddess. Some were beloved companions, mourned deeply. Others, were bred specifically for this. Yeah, that's the part they don't exactly write on the tourist brochures. Renef the scribe joins you again, his sandals whispering over the sand-dusted floor. He motions toward a side chamber, and you follow. Inside is a long, narrow room, cooler than the others. On its walls are painted scenes of cats being lovingly bathed, brushed, fed, and, well, not to sugarcoat it, sacrificed. In one panel, a priest gently places a kitten into a woven basket, covering it with linen. Another panel shows a knife. A third shows the same priest presenting the now mummified kitten to the goddess, whose painted face looks pleased. It's jarring, whiplash-inducing even. These animals were gods, but they were also offerings. Renef explains, matter-of-factly, that not all cats died naturally. There was an entire economy surrounding the production of feline mummies. Cat farms existed, churning out kittens to meet the spiritual demand. Some estimates suggest millions of mummified cats were buried in Egypt over the centuries. You try to wrap your head around it. It's like a paradox wrapped in linen. Supreme reverence. and yet institutionalized sacrifice. How could something be so sacred and so disposable? You ask Renef this, and he pauses, rubbing his chin. Sacred, he says slowly, does not mean safe. It hits you like a cold wind. Reverence doesn't equal kindness. In a culture that believes cats are divine, death isn't an end. It's a transition. And if a kitten's death serves a purpose, if it brings someone closer to the goddess, then who's to say it's wrong? Still, your modern instincts recoil. Renef shrugs. Many disagree. Some priests refused to allow the practice in their temples. Others insisted only cats that died naturally could be mummified. He points to a mural where a man appears to be pleading with a priest while holding a limp cat. There were debates, arguments. Some said we angered Bastet with our greed. Even now, scholars argue about it. Some believe the cat mummy industry corrupted the purity of Bastet's worship. Others argue it was just a deeply Egyptian way of expressing devotion, through ritual repetition and layers of meaning. There's even evidence that some of the mummies were fake, empty linen bundles or ones stuffed with bones from multiple cats. Fraud even in the afterlife. As you move deeper into the tomb, the air cools further, and you spot a long, narrow trench filled with thousands of mummified cats, all stacked neatly like scrolls in a forgotten archive. It's unsettling but weirdly beautiful, each one a prayer wrapped in linen. You crouch beside one, noting the careful ties, the way the head is tucked just so. Someone loved this little thing, or feared it, maybe both. In the farthest chamber you find something odd. A mural, unlike the others. It's darker, its colours more vivid, its tone different. A great cat, black-furred and enormous, towers over a city. People cower, temples burn. The goddess's eyes blaze like twin suns. No captions, no explanation, just destruction. Renef stares at it, his face unreadable. Some say that when too many cats were sacrificed without honour, Bastet changed. She remembered Sekhmet. You ask what that means. He doesn't answer. Instead, he reaches into a small alcove and pulls out a carved amulet. Tiny, shaped like a cat seated upright, eyes wide, ears alert. He presses it into your palm. For protection, he says. You don't ask from what. Later that night, back in your quarters, you lie awake, the cat amulet still clutched in your hand. Outside, the city sleeps in murmurs. You hear a soft sound, footsteps, no, paws. You sit up, your heart thudding. A silhouette slips across your windowsill, just a cat, just a normal living cat. She pauses, looks at you, then vanishes into the dark. The next morning begins with a commotion in the square outside the temple. You're halfway through a cup of barley beer when a crowd forms near a small side street, murmuring like bees disturbed in their hive. At first, you can't make out what's happening, but then you hear it. A scream. Short, sharp, cut off quickly. You drop your cup. The crowd parts slightly, just enough for you to see two soldiers wrestling a man to the ground. He's thrashing, yelling in that high, desperate tone people use when they know they're doomed. One of the soldiers, young, hard-eyed, keeps glancing nervously at a spot on the ground nearby. You edge closer and spot the reason. A cat. Still, lifeless. A single trickle of blood near its nose. Whatever happened here, it ended poorly. The priest from the day before, Renef, your accidental guide through the labyrinth of feline divinity, appears summoned from the temple. He walks slowly, head bowed, and examines the cat without touching it. The crowd is dead silent now, all eyes on him. He stands, looks at the soldiers, and simply nods. The accused man goes limp. He doesn't fight anymore. Later, in the shaded courtyard of the temple, you learn the details. The man had been unloading a cart of clay pots when the cat leapt up, perhaps to explore, perhaps just to enjoy the sun-warmed rim of a jar. In trying to shoo it away, too roughly, too fast, he knocked it over. A pot shattered. The cat, frightened, ran. He swore he didn't mean to hurt it, but when the shard settled, it was lying there, motionless. Doesn't matter, they said. Intent was irrelevant. The cat was sacred. Bastet does not tolerate carelessness. The law is absolute. The penalty? Death. It sounds like myth, like something out of a dramatic morality tale, but it's real. Ancient Egyptian law placed cats above reproach, not just spiritually, but legally. Killing a cat, by accident or otherwise, was grounds for capital punishment, and the people enforced it, often more viciously than the priests. There are stories of mobs dragging someone from their home for merely being accused of harming a cat. No trial, no defence, just blood and dust. And it wasn't rare. One particular tale passed quietly between scribes tells of a Roman diplomat. Yes, Roman from the land of togas and senators, visiting Alexandria during the Ptolemaic dynasty. He reportedly kicked a cat that had tried to steal a piece of fish from his tray. A soldier witnessed it. The diplomat laughed. He was dead before nightfall. Even the pharaoh couldn't stop the mob. You're told this with absolute sincerity, and no one in the room seems surprised. Renef nods slowly. We serve the gods, but cats, they are the gods. What's wild is that not all historians agree on how widespread these punishments were. Some argue that the laws were symbolic, meant to instill reverence rather than literal justice. But the archaeological record tells a different story. Cat statues are found in every level of Egyptian society, from royal tombs to humble homes, and wherever they are, there's evidence of ritual, honour, and in some cases, fear. One unearthed papyrus describes a family offering daily meals to a cat that had taken up residence near their home, just in case it was divine. We dare not offend her, it reads. So no, you're not imagining it. This society genuinely placed cats on a divine pedestal. To kill one was not just a crime, it was an offence against the universe's order. Ma'at, they called it. The cosmic balance. Break it. And you weren't just punished in this life. You risked chaos in the next. You find yourself watching cats differently now. Every flick of a tail, every narrowed eye carries weight. One rubs against your leg while you're sitting on a temple step. You freeze. Petting seems risky. What if it's not in the mood? What if it is, and you stop too soon? You settle for a respectful bow of the head. The cat blinks slowly and walks away. That night, the temple hosts a purification ritual, not because of the man's death, but because a sacred animal's life was ended. The cat's body is placed on a bed of palm fronds and wrapped in white linen. Music plays, a slow mournful tune on pipes and lyres, and the air fills with the smell of burning myrrh. The high priestess speaks a litany in a rhythmic chant. The cat's name is spoken. Yes, it had a name, like most temple cats. Hittafere, which means satisfied face. You attend the burial, again on that quiet hill beyond the city, where the cat is laid to rest in a small carved niche. The others remain nearby, silent watchers in the flickering torchlight. One licks her paw and doesn't look at you once. She doesn't have to. What strikes you isn't just the reverence, but the fear under it all. The feeling that these divine beings aren't just to be worshipped, they must be appeased. Like gods of fire and wind, they're unpredictable, beautiful, yes, sacred, yes, but never tame. One elder priest, half asleep beside the shrine, tells you that in older times there was a saying, "Do not anger the ears that hear silence." He chuckles, toothless. It means don't make noise where a cat sleeps or wakes. You sleep poorly that night. Your thoughts a whirl of fur and fire. The room feels warm despite the cool air. You swear you hear soft padding feet beyond the reed curtain. But when you peek out, there's nothing there, only the wind brushing through the palms and the soft glow of moonlight over the city of gods. You start the next day in the palace district, where everything is gilded and perfumed and suspiciously quiet, like the nobles are trying not to acknowledge how close the divine is. Or maybe they just don't want cat hair on their imported linen. Still, you've been granted entry to a formal feast, which means you're dressed in borrowed robes and sandals that are a half size too small, following a steward down a hallway lined with murals of lotus flowers, gold-leafed gods, and, you guessed it, cats. Cats sunning themselves on balconies, cats riding in tiny chariots, cats sitting between royal feet like little four-legged thrones. Inside the main chamber, the smell hits you first. Roast goose, honeyed bread, citrus oils wafting from the guests' wigs. You'd be starving if you weren't too busy trying to keep your jaw from hanging open. The room glows with polished alabaster. Cushions are heaped around low tables, where noblemen and women recline like they have never had to carry anything heavier than a wine goblet. Musicians hum softly in the corner, stringing quiet notes from curved harps. And the cats, they're everywhere. One reclines on a velvet pillow beside a seated princess, her fur black as obsidian, her eyes rimmed in kohl to match her human counterpart. Another strolls along the banquet table, sniffing without shame at platters of lamb and figs. Not a single servant stops them. No one dares. Instead, they step aside. Bow. Offer them morsels like the honoured guests they are. These cats aren't pets, they're royalty. A tall man in a gold collar leans toward you, grinning. That one, he whispers, nodding, toward a white Persian perched atop a golden stool. She belongs to the pharaoh's youngest son. When she sneezed last week, the palace physician was summoned from Memphis. You laugh. He doesn't. No, he says seriously. Summoned, as in dragged across the desert by chariot. 70 men, for a sneeze. You suddenly feel like maybe you're underdressed. The princess beside you raises her hand, and a servant appears immediately, offering a shallow bowl of cream, not to her, but to the sleek tortoise shell at her feet. The cat doesn't even look, just sniffs, decides it's not in the mood and strolls away. The princess shrugs like that's the final word. It is. You eat slowly, unsure how much attention you can draw to yourself without offending someone, or some cat. Occasionally one brushes against your ankles. You don't move, just breathe and pretend you're invisible. At one point, a massive tomcat leaps onto your lap without warning and begins kneading your thigh like it owns you. A few guests chuckle. One raises a goblet and says, "You've been chosen." You nod politely and try not to cry from the claws. You ask the steward later how this whole royal cat dynamic started. He looks at you like you've just asked why water is wet. Because cats are divine, he says. The closer you are to divinity, the more divine things you attract. He explains that in royal households, cats are treated with all the rituals afforded to gods. They receive offerings, are bathed in sacred oils, and sleep on linens embroidered with symbols of protection. They are given names as long as those of the pharaohs, names that invoke the stars, the sun, the moon. Some even have birth ceremonies, where a priest interprets the pattern of their spots or the curl of their whiskers. That's how they determine if the cat is touched by Bastet, or even a fragment of her reincarnated. There's an unspoken belief that cats choose their household, and not the other way around. A noble family that finds itself favoured by a feline is considered blessed. If a cat leaves a house, though, that's not good. People whisper, priests are consulted, offerings are made, sometimes entire homes are ritually cleansed. A departure might be a warning from the gods, or worse, a sign of disfavour. One royal family, you're told, built an entire side temple onto their estate after their household cat vanished. They filled it with statues, burned incense for 9 days, and renamed their daughter after the cat in hopes it would return. It didn't. The family line ended 2 generations later. Coincidence? The nobles don't think so. Historians today are still debating how much of this was superstition, how much was performance, and how much was political theatre. Some scholars argue that cats became symbols of status, like exotic pets in European courts centuries later. Others believe it went deeper, that these beliefs weren't exaggerated for show but were sincerely felt. After all, religion and politics weren't separate in ancient Egypt. If you ruled, you did so by divine right. If cats were divine, keeping them close made you seem more divine, more untouchable, more legitimate. Back in the palace, the feast winds down, musicians play slower. The wine runs freely. Several nobles doze against their cushions while the cats continue to move gracefully through the room like soft, living punctuation. One climbs into a bronze basin and falls asleep. No one dares move it. That basin will remain unused until the cat decides otherwise. A small girl, no older than 5, is led into the chamber holding a pale grey kitten. She approaches the head of the banquet, an older, regal man with a face like carved sandstone. The High Chancellor, perhaps. She kneels and presents the kitten as an offering. The room holds its breath. The man studies the kitten. He nods. She has the eyes of the moon, he says, voice dry as papyrus. We'll call her Samet. The crowd exhales. Someone begins a hymn. The kitten sneezes. And just like that, another priest is summoned. As the night deepens, you make your way back through the palace corridors, following soft torchlight and the echo of your own footsteps. You think about the layers of meaning wrapped around these animals. Comfort, power, danger, divinity. In this world, a purring bundle of fur can elevate you or destroy you, all depending on how you treat it, or how it treats you. When you step outside, the moon is bright and full overhead. A white cat waits on the steps, her green eyes gleaming in the dark. She blinks slowly, rises, and begins to walk. You follow. Of course you do, because you've learned the most important lesson here. In ancient Egypt, you don't own a cat owns you. Next day brings something a little different. You're told you'll be accompanying a group of soldiers training near the desert's edge, just outside the city. A break from temples and feasts, you think. Finally, some rough sand, hardened warriors, and maybe, just maybe, something that doesn't involve purring or tiny golden cat statues. You lace up your sandals, grab your water skin, and try to mentally prepare for some good old-fashioned military discipline. And you get it, at first. A cluster of bronze-armoured soldiers run drills beneath the harsh morning sun, muscles gleaming with sweat, shouting orders in that clipped, efficient way trained fighters do. Shields clash, spears strike, dust clouds swirl around their sandals as they move in tight formations. This is the Egypt that built empires, you think. The Egypt that carved its power into stone. Then you see the cats, not just one or two, but several, sitting at the edges of the training field, lounging on sun-heated rocks like they own the battleground, watching the soldiers with narrowed, calculating eyes. No one bothers them. Of course they don't. At first you figure it's just coincidence. Cats follow the heat, right? But then one of the officers, a thick-necked man with a broken nose and an oddly gentle voice, walks over to a ginger cat perched on a boulder and salutes her. Actually salutes. She blinks slowly. He walks away. You ask about it. He laughs. That one's been here longer than any of us. She's seen 3 captains promoted and 2 carted off in disgrace. We say she's Bastet's eyes on the battlefield. He nods slowly, thinking that's a metaphor. He shakes his head. No, I mean it. A soldier once kicked her by accident, slipped on an oil patch during sword practice, broke her tail. He pauses. He died in his sleep 2 nights later. No wound, no illness, just gone. You try to keep your expression neutral. You think it's coincidence, or he asks, eyebrows raised. She's picked the last 4 promotions correctly, and when she started sleeping beside a sick soldier, he got better. No one else did. He gestures at the rest of the cats, who are now draped across shields and helmets, sunning themselves without a care in the world. You learn to fight around them, he adds. They don't move for you, you move for them. As strange as it sounds, cats and war have long been entangled in Egypt's history, not just spiritually, but strategically. One of the most unbelievable but entirely real stories comes from the Battle of Pelusium, 525 BCE. The Persians, invading Egypt under Cambyses II, used a rather sinister tactic. They knew Egyptians revered cats, so they painted feline images on their shields and allegedly released real cats onto the battlefield. You can hardly believe it. A rain of terrified animals charging between spears and chariots, soldiers hesitating to swing their blades for fear of divine retribution. And it worked. Egyptian forces hesitated, faltered, refused to attack with full force. The Persians won. The city fell. You bring this up later to a retired general sitting beneath a fig tree, fanning himself lazily with a woven reed. He nods, spitting a date pit into the sand. They weaponized our gods, he says flatly. We were outnumbered, yes, but not defeated, not until they used what we couldn't touch. You ask if people still talk about it. They whisper about it, he replies. That battle broke something, not just in the military, but in the soul of the nation. It was the first time Bastet didn't protect us. Or perhaps, as some later priests suggested, she did, just not in the way they wanted. There are fringe theories that Bastet allowed Egypt to fall, withdrawing her favour to punish arrogance. Others believe she turned her gaze elsewhere, tired of being offered kittens and incense while the people ignored the deeper lessons of balance and protection. But that's all speculation. What you do know, what you see, is that even in the barracks, cats are treated with eerie respect. Soldiers place food beside their cots. Some wear small bronze amulets shaped like curled-up cats, pressed to their skin beneath their armour. One man says he lost a brother in battle, and the next night, a black cat lay across his chest until dawn. I dreamed of him, he says, his voice distant, and when I woke, I knew he'd passed on safely. Others share similar stories, not always about death, sometimes about protection. An archer swears he missed a target by a mile, but the arrow curved mid-air and struck true after a cat meowed behind him. Another tells you he fell asleep during watch duty, only to be woken by a sharp scratch on the cheek. He opened his eyes just in time to spot a bandit creeping through the reeds. The cat that scratched him? Gone. Some of these tales feel a little embellished, but the consistency, the seriousness in their eyes, the way they glance toward the shadow where the cats nap, All of it suggests these stories aren't for show, they're survival lore, and not one soldier, not a single one, considers a cat just an animal. Later in the day, after watching two men nearly fall over themselves trying not to disturb a kitten playing with a feather in the middle of a weapons drill, you sit beneath a date palm with your journal. A sleek black cat stretches out beside you. You offer her a piece of dried fish. She ignores it, because of course she does. But then she curls into your lap, purring softly, her warmth sinking into your skin like a charm. You think about the soldiers, about the ancient battle lost to compassion, about the way cats exist both in and beyond the world of humans, untouchable, divine, weaponized without being wounded. And maybe that's the whole point. You don't command a cat. You're lucky if it walks beside you. By now, you've grown used to the soft rustle of paws on stone, the weight of feline eyes tracking your every move, the way each temple, home, and even military outpost seems to have its own royal furball presiding over daily affairs like some four-legged, purring judge. But today's assignment is different. You're headed into one of the inner sanctums of the temple district, not to study scrolls or statues, but to observe something far more peculiar. You're shadowing a high priest whose job is, quite literally, cat caretaker to the gods. His name is Hotep Ka. He's small, wiry, draped in pristine linen robes so white they could blind you at noon. His sandals are polished, his arms adorned with tiny bangles shaped like curling tails. He meets you at the edge of the courtyard with a nod that's polite but firm, like he's tolerating your presence but would rather not be slowed down. A slender mauve-grey cat perches on his shoulder, completely unbothered by movement or balance. Her tail flicks with slow authority. She's the one who actually seems in charge here. This way, Hotep Ka says, and leads you into a small stone annex attached to the Bastet temple. Inside, the temperature drops a few degrees. The air smells like myrrh, fish oil, and, oddly, lemongrass. The sound of purring fills the space like ambient music. Cats are everywhere. Everywhere. Not just lounging, but occupying niches, curling around pedestals, slipping beneath curtain folds. It's a living, breathing sanctuary. And Hotep Ka, he's not a zookeeper. He's a priest, a theologian, and apparently a full-time feline concierge. They are not simply cats, he explains while kneeling beside a large copper bowl and scooping in strips of dried quail. Each is sacred. Each is Bastet. You must never call them pets. That word is foreign. Weak. You nod, silently correcting your internal vocabulary. He continues moving through the chamber with methodical precision. He checks on a litter of kittens nestled in a velvet-lined basket, each already wearing a tiny gold collar. He sings softly as he weighs the herbs on a scale, grinding them into a paste with a mortar. It's medicine, he explains, for a senior Tom with sore joints. When you raise an eyebrow, he gives you a look that could curdle milk. If the goddess limps, we all suffer. The role of cat caretaking, it turns out, is an actual priesthood, complete with training, rites, and selection ceremonies. Hotep Ka was chosen as a child when a temple cat walked into his house and fell asleep on his lap. His parents wept. He was taken to the temple the next day. The cat stayed with him for 13 years. She died on the same day I became chief caretaker, he says. She knew her work was done. You can't help but ask what happens if someone doesn't take the job seriously. Hotep Ka doesn't even blink. Then Bastet leaves the temple, and where she goes, disorder follows. Sickness, fire, rats, drought. Harsh, you think, but it tracks. Ancient Egyptians were not casual about their divine animals. These weren't symbols, they were manifestations. If a temple cat got sick, it wasn't just an illness, it was a crisis. Entire festivals would be postponed, offerings increased. People fasted. Renef mentioned a scribe once lost his hand in a fire after forgetting to change a cat's water bowl during a heatwave. Coincidence? Maybe, but also maybe not. In a far alcove of the annex, Hotep Ka introduces you to a Lady Isret, an elderly calico with one cloudy eye. She reclines on a low dais surrounded by garlands of dried flowers and bowls of saffron-scented milk. A priestess kneels beside her, combing her fur with what looks like a silver hairpin. Lady Isret stretches one paw, yawns, and then falls asleep mid-blink. She has been with us 20 years, Hotep Ka whispers. She has seen 5 pharaohs crowned and buried. She has walked through fire and returned. You're not sure if that's metaphorical or literal. No one clarifies, you don't ask. And yet, despite the divine reverence, there's something deeply human about this room. the way one priest hums while arranging cushions, the way another gently bandages a kitten's paw. These aren't just rituals, they're affection, quiet and reverent. It hits you that this priesthood isn't just about feeding and grooming divine cats. It's about nurturing a relationship between mortal and god that walks around on silent feet and sometimes coughs up hairballs. You sit for a while as Hotep-Ka lectures a group of novice caretakers. They're all under 20, dressed in simple linen, each with a feline companion sleeping in their laps. He quizzes them on diet, behaviour, grooming and omens. If a cat scratches the doorframe 3 times, it's a sign of rain. If it refuses to eat, a soul nearby is in danger. If it licks your left hand, favour from Bastet. The right hand, a warning. Some of these interpretations are based on texts and murals, but others, they've been passed down through oral tradition, whispers from older priests to younger ones. One novice raises his hand and nervously asks what it means when a cat stares at an empty space in the wall for hours. Hotep-Ka's face darkens. You do not ask what she sees, he says. There's a pause. Then he adds quieter. You simply offer incense. By now the sun outside is beginning to lower. Golden light filters through the latticework, striping the walls in warm ribbons. One cat climbs onto your shoulder without permission and begins purring directly into your ear. It's loud and oddly comforting. Hotep-Ka glances over and nods approvingly. She accepts you, he says, as if that settles it. You ask what happens when one of the sacred cats dies. Is there mourning, ritual, a moment of silence? Yes, he says. We fast for 1 day. We burn sacred oils, we prepare the body for Bastet, and then we wait. For what, you ask? He gives a tired smile. For the next one to walk through the door. Because that's the truth buried under all the reverence and ritual. Bastet's spirit doesn't die. It moves, finds a new host, a new form. You don't choose the cat chooses you, and if you're chosen, you'd better rise to the occasion. As you leave the temple annex, stepping into the cooling dusk, you turn back just once. Dozens of eyes gleam in the shadows, watching, judging, approving, maybe even laughing. The sound of purring follows you into the night. You've seen the rituals, the reverence, the purring little queens perched on altars, and the soldiers who bow to whiskers and claws. But today's experience drops the sacred curtain and reveals something even stranger. Law. Real, ink on papyrus, you might go to prison law. And as you're led into the administration wing of the city archives, escorted by a scribe who looks like he hasn't blinked in a decade, you're about to discover that cats in ancient Egypt weren't just divine. They had legal rights so strong they could have sued you into oblivion. The archive itself is a marvel. Clay shelves stacked high with scrolls, labels etched in both hieratic and demotic, the air thick with old ink and powdered beetle shell. You swear the walls are sagging under the weight of knowledge. A cat snoozes on a ledger nearby, tail flicking across a tax document like it's a game. The scribe doesn't even try to move her. Instead, he tiptoes around her, muttering about her lineage and holy status like she's Pharaoh's cousin. You decide not to step on any shadows today. You're handed a scroll dated to the reign of Samtik-Fu, and as the scribe unrolls it with exaggerated care, you see what looks like a complaint. Not against a person, but on behalf of a cat. You squint. A tenant had moved into a merchant's property and neglected to feed the sacred temple cat who came with the house. The cat became thin. A neighbour reported the neglect, and suddenly this tenant was dragged into court for divine negligence. He was fined, forced to sponsor a cleansing ritual, and his lease terminated. You read 3 more scrolls just like it. One involving a nobleman's attempt to breed cats outside the temple system, frowned upon, legally forbidden. Another about a boat captain who accidentally knocked a cat into the Nile with a loose cargo net. Witnesses claim the cat never resurfaced. The captain had to publicly weep, make a donation of silver, and provide food for 10 cats for a year to restore favour. You ask the scribe if all of this was enforced seriously. He gives you a long look and then says, "You think divine law is for show?" before huffing and walking off, arms full of records. Later he introduces you to a retired magistrate named Jemu, who claims to have presided over dozens of cases involving cats, though not against them, of course. Cats, you quickly learn, cannot be prosecuted, because they are incapable of sin. Jemu says this with such confidence that you don't even try to argue. He tells you one case involved a woman who tried to sell her neighbour's cat as part of a dowry arrangement. She claimed it had wandered onto her land, he says, sipping barley tea. Her defence was that the cat had clearly chosen her. He laughs. The temple cats choose many, but they are not dowry items. She was sentenced to 3 days of fasting and had to publicly apologise in front of the Bastet shrine. The cat, in turn, was gifted a necklace of lapis and a fresh fish. Naturally. This is when it dawns on you. Ancient Egypt didn't just worship cats. They wove them into the literal framework of society. Cats were protected by religious law, civil law and property law. You couldn't sell one without permission. You couldn't export them without documentation, more on that scandal later. You couldn't even yell at one too loudly near a temple without someone raising a brow and muttering about omens. There was one particular scroll that fascinates you, a list of local ordinances from a town near Thebes. It outlines proper behaviour in the presence of the divine feline, including rules like: do not approach without an offering, do not attempt to hold her without signs of approval, do not wake her from sleep with noise, do not speak ill of her even in jest. Violation of these could result in anything from fines to public shaming to the dreaded ritual silence, a punishment where the offender was not allowed to speak or be spoken to for an entire day. That one hits hard. One merchant was apparently subjected to it for joking that his cat ran the house. The joke? Not inaccurate. The offence? Prideful mockery. Outcome? Silence and additional offering of sardines. There's debate among scholars today about how strictly these rules were followed. Some suggest they were more cultural expectations than hard laws, like not parking in your neighbour's sacred lotus pond. Others argue that Egypt's religious and civil systems were so entwined that every law was divine law. If cats were part of the divine order, then disobeying a rule about them was like attacking the sun god himself. You ask Jemu what happened when a cat chose to leave a home. Was it a bad omen? A crime? Neither, he says. It was judgment. He tells you of a case where a temple cat repeatedly left its designated household and returned to the same humble potter's shop across town. After the third escape, the priests stopped trying to retrieve her. They declared that the potter was the rightful guardian, and the original household had fallen from favour. They were required to host a purification feast and donate an entire month's grain rations to the temple. No one disputed the decision. And what if someone tried to exile a cat, force it out? That, Gemma says, was rare. But when it happened, the punishment was severe. He mentions one case where a man attempted to drown a cat that kept stealing from his food stores. He didn't succeed. The cat escaped, soaked but furious. The next day, his grain silos were infested with rats. His wife developed a mysterious rash, and the neighbourhood ostracised him until he made an offering of sandalwood and wine. It wasn't just the act, Jemu says, it was the insult. To drive out a divine guest was to invite chaos. Back at the archive, the sun dips low, casting long shadows between the scroll racks. The cats begin to stir, stretching, yawning, blinking their amber eyes. One hops onto your lap uninvited. The scribe watches and nods. She likes you, he says. You must follow the rules now. You glance at the cat, who's now kneading your tunic with unapologetic claws. She purrs like a miniature thunderstorm. You're officially under divine jurisdiction. At first, you think you're just tagging along for a simple village outing, something low-key after days spent in high temples and dusty archives. But then someone whispers that the cat oracle will be in session tonight, and the whole village starts buzzing like bees in a broken hive. You glance around for clarification, expecting maybe a priest with a feline nickname or some poet who speaks in meows. Nope, they mean what they say. A literal cat is about to deliver divine guidance. You follow a crowd of barefoot villagers through winding alleyways lit by torches. Crickets chirp. The Nile gurgles softly in the distance. There's something in the air tonight, thick with anticipation and incense. Even the cats along the walls seem more alert, perched like statues on windowsills and rooftops, their eyes glowing with reflected firelight. The oracle chamber is small, round and roofless, with smooth stone walls and a central pedestal surrounded by flickering lamps. Straw mats line the floor and villagers begin sitting in reverent silence. A heavy door creaks open and a priest appears, draped in navy linens, his arms painted with symbols that shimmer faintly in the firelight. In his hands, a cat. Not just any cat. This one is massive, long-limbed, black as soot, with a single white crescent on her chest. Her name, someone whispers, is Tiaret, the Eye that Watches. You sit quietly as the priest walks the perimeter, holding Tiaret aloft like a living torch. The villagers bow their heads. Some murmur prayers under their breath. Others cry softly. You're not sure what you expected, but this feels serious, sacred, ancient. Tiaret is set on the pedestal. She sits, licks her paw once, then freezes. Her eyes narrow. And suddenly everyone is still. The priest claps once, loud and sharp. A young woman steps forward, trembling. She kneels before Tiaret and holds out a strip of linen with something scrawled on it. A question, a plea, a life caught in balance. She places it in a shallow bowl of oil at the foot of the pedestal and bows deeply. Then everyone waits. Tiaret tilts her head. She blinks, she leaps off the pedestal. Pads slowly around the bowl. Her tail swishes once, twice. Then she walks over to the girl, rests a paw on her outstretched hand, and lets out a single, low meow. Gasps ripple through the crowd. The girl sobs with relief. The priest nods solemnly and announces that her request, whatever it was, has been granted. Tiaret returns to her pedestal, tail high. You're baffled, still waiting for the part where someone pulls strings behind the scenes or explains the trick. But the villagers believe it. They feel it. And when it's your turn, something strange happens. You don't even know why you're stepping forward. You didn't prepare a question, but your feet move anyway, and before you know it, you're kneeling on the mat, heart thudding, palms slick with sweat. You look into Tiara's golden eyes and feel like someone just pried open your ribcage. The priest murmurs something. You think he's asking your name. You try to answer, but your voice catches. Tiaret walks right up to you, sniffs your hand, then she turns, lifts her tail and smacks you in the face with it. The crowd gasps. The priest looks stunned. She has rejected you, he says, almost apologetically. You freeze. Rejected? By a cat? A divine judgment? The priest clears his throat. It does not mean doom, he says quickly, though his voice quivers. Sometimes it means you must return when the path is clearer. But the villagers are whispering. A few glance away. One woman crosses herself with a gesture you don't recognize. You can feel the air shift. Being rejected by the oracle cat isn't just embarrassing. It's a cosmic slap on the wrist. Maybe even a warning. You step back, cheeks hot, heart pounding. Tiaret, back on her pedestal, begins grooming herself like nothing happened. You wonder if she even remembers you. Probably not, but now you'll remember her forever. The night continues. More people step forward. Some are granted answers, others ignored. One poor man has his offering knocked clean across the floor. No one laughs, because this isn't just a ceremony. It's theology in motion. Bastet isn't just a name carved in stone or a statue bathed in oil. She moves, chooses, and judges through fur and claw and gaze. Later you sit by the riverbank watching the moon ripple on the surface. Renef finds you there and hands you a cup of warm date wine. You were rejected, he says gently. Thanks, you mutter. I noticed. He chuckles. It happens, rare, but not shameful. Sometimes the gods wait. Sometimes they test. You sip the wine. It tastes like old sugar and regret. Renef goes quiet, then adds, there was a time long ago when a pharaoh sought Tiaret's blessing before a major battle. She ignored him 3 nights in a row. He went anyway. He lost everything. Some say it was pride, others say she knew his fate and refused to soften it. You glance at him. And you're saying, I should be glad she hit me in the face? He shrugs. You're alive. She acknowledged you. There are worse fates. As the breeze picks up, a stray cat curls up beside your leg. You reach to pet it, but it darts off before you touch. Maybe that's the point. You're not supposed to understand them, you're just supposed to listen. Even if what they say is no. You wake up with paw prints on your robe and a vague feeling that you've been judged in your sleep. Again. The marks are dusty, precise, stamped across your chest like little divine stamps of disapproval. You try to brush them off. They reappear 5 minutes later. You stop trying. Your next stop is the temple's scriptorium, a quiet, shaded sanctuary where scribes copy sacred texts, record prayers, and apparently deal with a lot of cat-related interruptions. The building itself is square and orderly, with narrow windows, stacked papyrus scrolls, and rows of low writing benches. Everything smells of ink, oil, and faintly of old milk. You're welcomed by a middle-aged scribe named Nebre, whose beard is as neatly trimmed as his scrolls are tightly rolled. He gestures for you to sit on a low stool while he explains the process of transcribing temple documents. Accuracy is vital, he says. You preserve the words of the gods. You nod. Reverence makes sense. And then a tabby walks across his scroll, literally, just hops up and traipses across the wet ink, leaving a trail of tiny paw prints from one divine phrase to the next. Nebro freezes. You brace for shouting, maybe a little cursing. Instead, he bows slightly to the cat, mutters something that sounds suspiciously like "thank you," and gently lifts the scroll to dry. She has blessed the text, he explains matter-of-factly. Her presence confirms its truth. You try to keep a straight face, but this happens again and again. Cats wander in and out of the scriptorium like they own stock in papyrus. One stretches across a half-finished hymn to Bastet. Another knocks over an ink jar with the kind of slow-motion nonchalance only a cat can muster. Not a single scribe complains. They just adapt. One apprentice, a nervous-looking teen with smudged fingers and wide eyes, tells you in a whisper that he once corrected a scroll after a cat had walked across it. Changed the wording, re-inked the lines. His mentor saw it, gasped, and made him sleep in a grain silo for 3 days as penance. She had chosen the phrasing, he mutters. I doubted her. The belief here isn't just symbolic, it's practical. If a cat intervenes in your writing, that's not an interruption. That's editorial input from Bastet herself. Whole scrolls have been rewritten because a cat refused to walk near them. One old legend even claims that a priest was struck blind after brushing a cat off his desk mid-translation. His replacement kept a basket of mice nearby to ensure feline visitation. You ask Nebre if this ever slows the process down. Oh, constantly, he says without frustration, but haste has never pleased the gods. The scriptorium maintains logs of its cat interactions, literal, paw-thorized edits recorded on the back of some scrolls. Today, Sutan left prints across the names of 3 priests, taken as a sign of their favour. Mira slept beside a verse for 2 hours. We consider it sealed. It's both absurd and oddly touching. You get the sense that these scribes don't just tolerate the cats, they depend on them. You're allowed to view one of the oldest scrolls in the collection, kept in a box wrapped in oiled linen and sealed with wax. It's a hymn to Bastet, long and ornate, with elegant script and flourishes that shimmer faintly under the lamplight. And there, in the corner, preserved like some sacred signature, is a paw print, crisp, perfect, right on top of a verse that reads, "She sees what you cannot. She speaks through silence. She judges without noise. You shiver." Modern scholars have found these paw prints all over ancient manuscripts, literally. In tombs, temple ruins, even in records that have nothing to do with cats. It's one of those little fringe facts that keeps historians up at night. Evidence that these animals weren't just tolerated. They were participants, divine co-authors, if you will. There's a debate, of course. Some say the paw prints are just accidents, that modern interpreters are reading too much into coincidence. But others argue, and fiercely, that in a culture as spiritually layered as Egypt's, nothing was accidental. Especially not when the accidents repeatedly occur on sacred passages. In one instance, a legal document was halted because a cat sat on the signature line for 3 hours. The signing was rescheduled. The man died the next day. Coincidence? Nobody here thinks so. They refiled the document without his name and let the cat pick the replacement, his brother, who later became high priest. Back in the scriptorium, you watch Nebre carefully roll a new scroll. A cat paces the edge of the desk, tail high, eyes narrowed. Nebre waits. She steps down. The scroll is now considered complete. You ask if he ever writes anything without feline approval. "Only shopping lists," he says, "and even those I leave near the temple door, just in case." As dusk settles, a final prayer is read aloud by the scribes, each taking turns in low melodic voices. The cats gather, not in a circle, not in any trained pattern, but slowly, casually, as if they just feel when it's time to witness something sacred. They lie near the walls, some curl around lamps, others climb onto the laps of priests. One sits on the altar itself, tail curled neatly, eyes half-lidded. And when the last word is spoken, she meows. Just once, everyone bows, you do too. Because in a world written in ink and claw marks, sometimes the editors wear fur, Day begins with dust in your nose and the scent of something very, very dead. You're miles outside the city now, deep in the limestone hills that fringe the desert's edge, walking alongside a team of labourers and priests toward a site that archaeologists thousands of years from now will refer to, half in awe, half in horror, as the Great Cat Coffin Factory. Doesn't sound sacred? Trust me, it is, and you're not ready for what you're about to see. At first glance, it looks like any other burial site. Low tomb entrances carved into stone, scattered shards of pottery, the occasional sun-bleached bone. But as you step inside the first chamber, blinking as your eyes adjust to the torchlight, you realise just how far the cult of Bastet really went. Stacked from floor to ceiling in narrow winding corridors are thousands of cat mummies. Not in tombs, not on altars, just lined up, bundled tightly in linen, sometimes shaped like actual cats, with ears and painted eyes, and other times compressed into bundles so generic they could be confused for loaves of bread. The smell is part ancient linen, part resin, yeah, that's definitely decay. You walk slowly. Every step kicks up dust and memory. A priest guiding the tour stops you beside a pile of discarded wrappings. Not all are properly buried, he says grimly. Some were rushed, some were manufactured. He doesn't say it like he's proud, it's closer to regret. See, what started centuries ago as a heartfelt way to honour Bastet, offering a beloved pet in sacred ceremony, eventually became a booming industry. The demand for cat mummies exploded. Pilgrims came from all over Egypt, hoping to curry divine favour by purchasing a mummified cat to leave at her temple. And the temple couldn't keep up, so they outsourced. Suddenly, there were breeding farms, kittens raised specifically for sacrifice, litters planned like papyrus exports. You're shown a storage chamber where jars of oils, herbs, and tools of embalming line the walls. It's a literal feline assembly line. One worker preps the body, another wraps, another paints, all day, every day. And the cats, they're everywhere in various states, freshly mummified, partially preserved, crumbling with age. It's overwhelming. You think of the pampered temple cats, the royal darlings, the ones with their own priests and gold dishes. This is not that. This is the mass production side of faith. The spiritual dark alley behind the candle-lit altar. Renef catches up with you here, his sandals grey with ash and his expression heavier than usual. Hard to believe, he says quietly, that something so holy could become so profitable. You ask how people justified it. Some believed each death, even the forced ones, sent a soul directly to Bastet's side. They said it was a mercy, a divine shortcut. He sighs. Others didn't ask questions. It's not like there weren't voices against it. You pass a mural on the wall of a lesser chamber. Simple, hastily painted, but haunting. It shows a single cat walking away from a crowd of people, tail high, head turned back. The inscription reads, "She sees too much blood." Some modern scholars believe that toward the end of the cat mummy boom, the practice began to fracture. Certain temples refused to accept mass-produced mummies. Others tested them and found bundles filled with bone fragments, straw, even rocks. Fraudulent cats sold to unsuspecting pilgrims. That's right. In ancient Egypt, even the cat sacrifice industry had a black market. There's even evidence, fringe but compelling, that some tombs were robbed not for treasure, but for the mummies themselves. Dried, powdered cat remains were sold as ingredients in medicines, aphrodisiacs, even paint. In one scroll, a merchant boasts of a shipment of divine dust, heading to Nubia. No one wants to say what happened to those mummies once they left sacred ground. You reach the far end of the cat tomb, where a lone figure sits in front of a small altar, an elderly embalmer whose hands are stained with resin. He doesn't speak at first, just works. Methodically wraps a tiny kitten, humming under his breath. You can't look away. The kitten is limp, already gone, its face peaceful. Its final swaddling looks more like a cradle than a coffin. Finally, the embalmer speaks. "She was sick," he says softly. "Blind, dying. I held her as she passed." You ask if all the cats here were treated so gently. He looks at you, and for a second he seems ancient. Not in age, but in grief. Like someone who's witnessed too much holiness turned to commerce. "No," he says, "not all. But this one I will carry to Bastet myself." It's easy to forget. walking through rows of identical linen bundles, that each of these was once a living thing, soft, curious, alive. Maybe one slept beside a potter's wheel. Maybe one hissed at a soldier and saved his life. Maybe one clawed the face of a corrupt merchant. Maybe none of that. Maybe they were just cats, but they mattered. Back in the city, Renef tells you that after a time, the overproduction of mummified cats created unrest. Droughts were blamed on false offerings. Priests whispered that Bastet was growing silent. "We flooded her shrines with death," one elder is recorded as saying, and then she turned her gaze away. Eventually the practice faded. Slowly. Some temples banned cat sacrifices. Others returned to honouring live cats only. A few kept doing both in secret. You sit by the river that night, head full of linen and claw marks, thinking about the line between devotion and excess, about how easily sacred things become business, about how even a god can be exhausted. A cat pads up beside you, silent as shadow. She sits, doesn't purr, doesn't blink, just watches the water with you. You don't try to pet her, you just sit together. By now you've seen a lot. Temple guardians, oracle cats, armies bowing to whiskers. But today you're walking into a palace garden to meet someone who makes even the scribes lower their voices. Princess Neferura, the pharaoh's niece and self-declared high mistress of Bastet's lineage. That title, by the way, is not symbolic. It's written in stone, literally. On a slab near the royal aviary, the garden itself is paradise carved into desert. Date palms sway lazily over manicured pools, exotic birds flutter between acacia trees, and the air smells like jasmine and lemon balm. But it's the cats that catch your eye. Dozens of them, lounging on velvet cushions, dozing in marble bowls, or delicately batting at dangling garlands of dried lotus petals like little aristocrats with nowhere better to be. Princess Neferura steps into view like she's gliding. She's young, maybe 20, with sharp cheekbones, painted eyes, and an attitude so regal she could probably command the Nile to run backward. Draped in gold-trimmed linen, she carries a tiny white kitten, curled up in one arm like an accessory. You're not entirely sure whether she's about to grant you wisdom, or have you tossed into a crocodile pit for not bowing deeply enough. "Come," she says without looking at you, "and do not step on the tails. I count them every morning." You follow, tiptoeing around a trio of orange tabbies sprawled across the path like furry traps. Neferura leads you into a shaded portico where an older cat, jet black and missing one eye, sits on a lacquered bench like a retired war general. "This," she says, "is Set Mehret. He is the father of 8 litters, 27 grandkids, and 1 line of priesthood-bound temple cats. We traced their bloodlines last season. He's divine." You blink. "You're keeping cat pedigrees?" She narrows her eyes at you. "Of course, Bastet chooses her forms with care. We merely honour her selections. Turns out the royal family isn't just breeding cats for company. They are cultivating entire bloodlines. These aren't barn cats. These are feline dynasties, traced, named, and recorded with more precision than some human families. You're handed a scroll so finely inked it could pass as poetry, but it's actually a genealogy chart." Neferura taps a line with her polished nail. "This line," she says, "descends from Mehenu, the palace cat who slept beside Pharaoh Jet during the dreams that foretold the flooding of the Nile." You try to respond, but she's already moved on. "And here," she points again, "are the night whiskers, named for their black coats and tendency to stare at walls no one else dares approach." You ask, gently, if the cats are selected for behaviour or looks. She scoffs. "Both. Divinity has standards." Each cat is tested as a kitten. Not cruelly, but observantly. Do they walk into shrines bidden? Do they ignore offerings? Are they drawn to sacred fires or recoil? Do they meow during recitations? If a kitten yowls 3 times during a reading of the hymn to Bastet, that's considered a mark of spiritual potential. You're told one such kitten once interrupted a coronation, ran across the throne room, climbed onto the pharaoh's lap, and promptly bit his finger. She was named Temple-born and later given her own priest. And no, it's not just show. These cats matter. Neferura claims the lineages are used for prophecy, healing, and the choosing of temple guardians. One particular breed, lean, silver-furred, almond-eyed, is always sent to oracles. They're said to see the god's edge. Another breed, larger and stormy grey, is trained for war camps, not to fight, but to sense treachery. If a cat from that line refuses to enter a tent, the commander sleeps elsewhere. There's a story Neferura shares, told with all the flair of someone who knows she owns the room. A rival noble tried to steal one of her kittens to raise in his own house, hoping to absorb the cat's divine luck. But the kitten refused food for 7 days, escaped, and returned to her doorstep at dawn, covered in ash and carrying a dead mouse like an offering. I named her Loyalty, she says, stroking the kitten in her lap. She now sleeps on the ledger where we record marriage pacts, just to be sure. Modern scholars have debated whether this cat-breeding aristocracy was real or embellished. There's little surviving evidence of formal feline pedigrees, but some tombs do include references to sons of Bastet's chosen, or keepers of the sacred line. Fringe historians argue that temples may have kept breeding programs, possibly even early attempts at selective lineage. And let's be honest, if anyone was going to invent royal cat dynasties, it was Egypt. You ask Neferura if she believes the cats know their legacy. She gives you a look like you've asked if the sun knows it shines. They walk like gods. They sleep like queens. Of course they know. You spend the afternoon watching a litter of 6-week-old kittens being introduced to the garden. Each one wears a silk ribbon. They're brought forward one by one and offered small trinkets, fish bones, beads, tiny silver charms. Which one they paw at first is considered significant. One chooses a bead, another the fishbone. One ignores everything and walks away. She will be the bold one, Neferura says, eyes gleaming. We will place her in the Temple of Dawn. Let's see if the goddess speaks through her. As the sun dips low, casting golden light across the courtyard, the cats stretch and scatter like living shadows. Neferura rises and begins her walk back into the palace, her white kitten nestled under her chin like a purring collar. Before she disappears behind the colonnade, she calls over her shoulder, "If you return tomorrow, bring a ribbon, not red, that's for the mourners." You're not sure if it's a test or an invitation. You stay in the garden until night falls, watching the lineage of gods chase fireflies like bored royalty, and you wonder, if these are their descendants, what were the originals like? You're jolted awake by the unmistakable sound of pottery shattering. It's close, too close. You sit up on your reed mat, heart thudding, and find yourself face to face with a cat standing perfectly still beside a toppled oil jar. The contents are spreading slowly across the floor, the scent of cumin and old olives drifting into the warm air. The cat's expression is unreadable. Of course it is. You don't move, neither does the cat. Somewhere outside a bell chimes. Then a scream. You're on your feet in second, rushing to the temple courtyard where the scene unfolding looks like the beginning of a particularly dramatic scroll illustration. A man, young, maybe a novice priest, is on his knees in front of a shrine sobbing openly. A cat is perched just behind him on the altar, back arched, ears flat, eyes locked on his shaking form like judgment incarnate. You recognize her instantly, Tiaret, the oracle cat, and she looks furious. Priests are gathering, speaking in urgent whispers. One of them, a thick-armed woman named Setka, turns to you and says grimly, "He broke protocol, lit incense in the wrong order." You blink. "That's it?" She nods. "The goddess doesn't tolerate shortcuts." It seems absurd, but you've seen how seriously these rituals are taken. Every step of the process, from waking the cats to arranging their food bowls, has a structure, an order, a rhythm designed to honour the balance of the divine. That balance? It just got snapped in half like a papyrus reed. You watch as the priests begin the purification rites. The air grows thick with the smoke of juniper and cedarwood. The novice is stripped of his ceremonial sash. He sobs harder. Tiaret hasn't moved. She's still glaring. Then, just when things couldn't get stranger, a second cat, one you haven't seen before, appears on the temple wall. Pale grey, eyes like polished moonstone. She leaps down, lands silently beside Tiaret and sits. The two cats stare at each other. A tension hums in the air. Then, as if coordinated, they both meow at the same time. Once, just once, and that's when the wind starts. A sudden gust rushes through the courtyard, flipping papyrus sheets off the tables, rattling wind chimes, lifting veils and sending a priest's wig tumbling off his head. Everyone freezes. Tiaret blinks slowly, then turns and walks away, tail high. The grey cat follows. The novice faints. Later you corner Renef and ask what just happened. He takes a deep breath and says, "Bastet reminded us she is not only protection, she is also wrath." Turns out while Bastet is remembered in modern imagination as soft and maternal, her duality was well known in ancient times. She wasn't just a loving goddess, she had teeth. She was the comforter and the punisher, the gentle purr and the claw to the face. If you kept the balance, she favoured you. If you disrespected her, even in small ways, she showed up. The temples had entire rituals designed to calm her wrath. Offerings of sweet oils, midnight chants, dances performed with slow, hypnotic grace. And if things really went sideways, blood sacrifice, not feline, never that, but something to prove you were serious. A prized chicken, perhaps. A fine cut of lamb. There are even records of nobles donating their own jewellery in desperation. One scroll recounts a landowner who gifted an entire vineyard to the temple of Bastet after a temple cat hissed at him during a festival. His crops had been failing. After the offering, they flourished again. You ask if people really believe the cats could tell when something was off. Renef doesn't answer with words. Instead, he pulls you aside and shows you a mural tucked in a side corridor of the temple. It shows Bastet in her feline form, seated between two scales. One side holds a heart, the other a feather. Typical symbols of balance and judgment. But what's unusual is the expression on Bastet's face. It's not serene or fierce. It's watching, evaluating, waiting. She doesn't strike first, Renef says, but she sees. There's another, more obscure tale that starts to surface as you dig deeper into the temple's whispered history. Some say that long ago, a group of priests tried to modernize Bastet's worship, simplify the rituals, minimize the offerings, make the ceremonies more efficient, faster, sleeker. It didn't end well. According to legend, one night every cat in the temple vanished. Just gone. Bowls untouched, cushions cold. The priests panicked, spent the day searching. On the second night the temple caught fire. By dawn only the main statue of Bastet remained, unscathed but newly marked with soot across the eyes. Within a week the cats returned, silent, regal, unbothered. The message was clear. You don't change the sacred rhythm, you don't rush the divine. There's another wrinkle in the scholarly debate about Bastet's wrathful side. Some researchers argue that she absorbed aspects of other deities over time, Sekhmet being the most notable. Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of plague and war, had a temper so destructive that even Ra had to drug her into submission with beer dyed red to resemble blood. Some believe Bastet inherited this fury. Others say they were two sides of the same coin all along, but here in Bubastis, the priests don't care about the scholarly split. To them, Bastet isn't a compilation of myths. She's alive, she listens, she acts through her cats, through their gazes, their silences, and their sudden terrifying moods. You watch the novice, now conscious again, undergo a penance ceremony in the lower courtyard. He's tasked with scrubbing every shrine base by hand, not with soap, with milk, symbolic of course, offering nourishment back to the divine. Tiaret watches from a ledge above. She yawns, then walks away. You're not sure if that's forgiveness or just boredom. That night, while the temple sleeps and the incense fades to ashes, you hear it. A low growl, not angry, just present, like something letting you know it's there. You sit up. A cat sits at the foot of your mat, watching, blinking, tail. Flicking once, then she turns and walks into the dark. You lie back down slowly, the chill still crawling down your spine. You don't light a lamp, you just whisper an apology. For what, you're not sure, but it feels appropriate. You're escorted today by a temple healer named Tahuti, a stooped man with papyrus-thin skin, and the kind of dry sarcasm that makes you instantly trust him. He doesn't waste time with pleasantries, just hands you a bundle of herbs, gestures for you to follow, and mutters something like, "Try not to faint this time." Comforting. He's leading you to the House of Life, the temple's medical wing. It's a walled compound, quieter than the others, heavy with the scent of boiled acacia, burning resin, and something sharper underneath. Inside, low wooden tables are stacked with stone jars, pestles, and neatly bundled scrolls. In the centre of the courtyard, a cluster of cats lounges in patches of sunlight, eyes half closed, paws twitching in sleep. Healing cats, Tahuti calls them. You think he's joking. He isn't. These, he says, pointing at a particularly fat orange cat curled on a stack of linen, are the guardians of the sick room. They choose where they rest. And if they lie on you during the night, it's a good sign. If they refuse, well, start dictating your funeral wishes. The idea that cats bring healing isn't new here. Bastet herself was often invoked for medicine, fertility, and protection from disease. In fact, the Temple of Bastet had its own team of physicians who studied both divine omens and practical remedies, and kept detailed logs of which cats interacted with which patients. There's an entire room dedicated to feline prescriptions. A scroll here shows a drawing of a cat sitting on someone's chest, annotated with a note. Patient experienced easier breathing by morning. Another depicts a black cat curled at the foot of a bed with a caption that reads, "Fever broke during third watch." You squint. Are they treating cats like medicinal tools? No, Tahuti says, reading your expression. We treat them like guides. They sense things we can't. He leads you into a side room where a young boy lies on a reed cot, eyes shut, skin pale as linen. A tabby perches on his hip, purring steadily. Tahuti doesn't touch the boy. He watches the cat instead. She's been there 2 days, he says. If she leaves by sunset today, the boy will recover. If not, we prepare his car for the journey. You ask what happens if the cat leaves and the boy still dies. Then we were wrong, Tahuti says simply. The gods were not. It's strange how matter of fact they are about death here. But then, in a world where gods walk on 4 legs and knock over medicine bowls for fun, maybe nothing's truly final. Tahuti shows you a room filled with small wooden idols, each shaped like a cat, painted black, their eyes inset with green stone. These, he explains, are used in healing rituals. If someone is too weak to attend the temple, the priest brings the statue to them. Or, if they're very lucky, a real cat shows up on its own. The superstition goes deeper. Some say cats carry the illness away, absorbing it into themselves and then purging it. Others believe they simply warn the goddess, who then intervenes. A few fringe scrolls hint that some cats are the illness, manifestations sent to test a soul's strength. Those theories are less popular, probably because they involve fewer cuddles and more exorcisms. Tahuti introduces you to a woman named Paddy, a patient recovering from a snake bite. She lifts her bandaged leg and grins. The moment that grey furball curled up beside me, she says, I knew I'd live. Better than any doctor. Yet she reaches down to scratch the ears of the grey furball in question, who promptly bites her hand and stalks away. Tahuti chuckles. That's how you know he likes you. But it's not all incense and purring miracles. Tahuti pulls out a jar filled with something unsettlingly dark and gelatinous. This, he says, was drawn from a sick priest. After his death, 3 cats refused to enter his chamber. We believe he carried a parasite, something that made his car impure. You freeze. Wait! Are you saying the cats can sense disease? Tahuti raises a brow. What do you think I've been telling you? Modern scientists might smirk, but the connection between cats and sickness is real, just not in the way these priests imagined. Today we know cats can carry Toxoplasma gondii, a parasite that can, in certain cases, affect human behaviour. Some scholars speculate that the ancient Egyptians may have noticed patterns, people who spent too much time around cats falling ill or behaving oddly, but instead of blaming the cats, they saw them as messengers, revealing what was already wrong. And then there's the healing. Studies now suggest that a cat's purring frequency, between 25 and 50 hertz, can promote bone and tissue regeneration. That's not myth, that's science. So maybe, just maybe, when Tahuti tells you that purring soothes the dying, he's not wrong. He's just working with different language. You walk through a ward where 3 cats sleep at various bedsides. Each patient watches them anxiously. No one speaks above a whisper. One woman clutches a tiny figurine shaped like her bedside cat. Another keeps hers close with a bit of salted fish tucked under her pillow. It feels like a hospital, yes, but also a chapel. You ask Tahuti what happens when a cat dies here. He doesn't answer at first, just looks down the hallway, where a black cat is being carried away on a low litter, her tiny body wrapped in white linen, her head carefully anointed with oil. Same rites as for a priest, he says quietly. Sometimes more. That night, you lie in your sleeping mat staring at the ceiling. You feel the weight of something warm against your legs. A cat curled tight, purring like distant thunder. You didn't hear her come in. You don't know her name, but as your heartbeat slows to match her rhythm, your breathing evens out and the worries of the day blur into darkness. You start to understand what Tahuti meant. She's not healing you, she's letting Bastet know where to find you. It's just past dawn when you find yourself standing before a statue that doesn't look like the others. You've seen plenty of feline monuments by now, sleek obsidian guardians, limestone loungers, dainty lap cats with gold earrings. But this one is different, taller, rougher, made not of polished stone but dark granite veined with something metallic. And the strangest part? The eyes. They aren't carved at all, they're holes. Deep, unblinking sockets that seem to suck in the early morning light. The priests call her She Who Watches From Within. There's no official name carved into the plinth. No dedicatory inscription. Just the statue and a small offering dish, placed permanently at her feet, filled daily with milk and crushed herbs. Sometimes flowers, sometimes bones. You don't ask, not yet. Your guide today is a sharp-eyed acolyte named Nofret. She's about 15, smug as a chess master, and walks like she's already been told she'll be High Priestess by 20. She notices your attention lingering on the statue. That one's not for tourists, she says, lips twitching into a smile. She's private. Private like sacred, you ask. Private like dangerous? Well, that's encouraging. She leads you down a narrow corridor behind the main Bastet temple, into a lesser-known wing with older murals, cracked tiles, and a smell that doesn't quite go away no matter how many incense burners are lit. This is where the fringe cults used to meet, she explains. The groups that didn't just worship Bastet as goddess of protection and healing, but saw her as something deeper, older, hungrier. You're told of an underground sect once active here called the Whispered Claw. Not a fan club, not a priesthood, but a collection of dreamers, mystics, and those who claimed the cat spoke to them in full sentences. They worship not the sweet, nurturing Bastet of the upper temple, but her shadowed version, goddess of hidden truths, quiet vengeance, the kind of justice that comes without warning. Their sacred symbol? A statue that matches She Who Watches From Within. You ask if she's really different from the other depictions of Bastet. Oh yes, Nofret says. She doesn't listen the way others do, she hears. You stare at her, waiting for a follow-up. She leans closer. If you speak into her ear at midnight, she answers. Answers how? Nofret shrugs. Some say she whispers, some say she scratches the walls. One man claimed he saw his future in her eyes. She pauses. He jumped into the Nile the next morning. Cool. You glance back at the statue. It's not menacing exactly, but there's something off about it. The angles are too sharp, the pose too rigid, the tail is coiled like a spring, not relaxed. And those hollow eyes, you swear they're deeper now than they were when you first saw them. Nofret says some priests tried to remove the statue generations ago, but when they wrapped it in cloth and prepared it for transport, every cat in the temple vanished for 3 days. The fires wouldn't light. The food spoiled. One priest began coughing up hair. They put the statue back. The cats returned. Nothing else was said. There's a scholarly debate, of course there is, about whether this statue represents a separate cult or just an alternate aspect of Bastet, one not normally shown in official worship. Some argue it's not Bastet at all, but a now lost feline deity absorbed into her over time. A few fringe archaeologists even propose the statue predates Bastet's mainstream worship entirely, that it's a remnant of something older, pre-dynastic, passed down through oral tradition and hidden rites. A few lines on a fragment of papyrus hint at a group called the Silent Listeners, who believed cats didn't just connect to the divine, they were messengers from another plane altogether, not gods but agents, intermediaries between our world and something else, something darker. You mention this to Nofret. She grins. You've been reading the banned scrolls, haven't you? You follow her to a side chamber where another mural has been partially scrubbed away, but not completely. You can still make out the shape, a feline form, larger than life, surrounded by figures kneeling in anguish. There are no offerings in this image, no smiles, just empty bowls and hands raised in desperation. Below the mural is a fragment of inscription. She comes not when called, but when due. That line chills you more than anything else so far. Still, people come to She Who Watches From Within, not in crowds, never in the daylight. But they come, You find remnants left at her feet, tiny bones wrapped in cloth, pieces of mirror, carved tokens. You ask Nofret what people ask her for. Vengeance, she says plainly. Truths too ugly for Bastet's gentle face, or answers they already know but can't admit. You sit before the statue for a while, not praying, not speaking, just listening. You half expect to hear something, movement, whispering, a soft meow echoing from the stone. Nothing comes, but the silence feels denser, like you're not alone in it. That night, back in your chamber, you dream of her, not Bastet, her, the statue. She's walking through corridors of black stone, trailing shadows behind her like a cloak. Her eyes are still hollow, but you feel them on you. Watching, waiting, not angry, just ready. When you wake up, the air feels different. Your pillow has been nudged to one side. There's a small, perfect paw print on your blanket, made of soot or maybe ash. The window's still closed. You don't ask questions, so you leave a piece of bread beside your door just in case. Because some gods you pray to with incense, and some you feed so they pass you by. It begins with a scroll, a boring one supposedly, just another archive record, handed to you in the scribe's quarters with a dismissive wave and a comment about tax codes. You're halfway through nodding off when one sentence jumps out. 32 jars of fish oil diverted from the Bastet Shrine Fund to private storage, location sealed by High Priest Anku under pretext of feline upkeep. That's when your eyes snap open, because in ancient Egypt, feline upkeep could mean anything from blessed meat delivery to apparently creative embezzlement. You dig further. The more scrolls you unroll, the clearer the pattern becomes. Duplicated supply lists, overlapping inventory records, jars that were marked as sacred offerings on one document and trade goods on another. You're no trained investigator, but something's fishy, and not just literally. You take your findings to Renef, who reads them with a slow nod and a sigh that sounds like he's already regretting what you're about to drag him into. It always starts with fish oil, he mutters. Then it turns into something much messier. He tells you what the official records won't. For decades, certain temple officials have quietly rerouted offerings meant for the sacred cats, oils, incense, grain, even imported ointments, and sold them on the black market. Not because they didn't believe in Bastet, they believed plenty. But when pilgrims from across Egypt brought lavish gifts hoping for favour, the sheer volume became tempting. And the cats, you ask? They were still fair, still worshipped, just not always with what was intended. Apparently some offerings labelled for the goddess were redirected entirely. In one scroll, an acolyte records that 3 cats were being rotated between temples to create the illusion of dozens. They were given new names, different collars, paraded in front of donors, then quietly carried back through hidden doorways like 4-legged celebrities on a press tour. You're stunned. The temple isn't just a house of worship, it's a business. One with very sharp claws and even sharper account ledgers. Things really blow open when you're granted access to a private storeroom supposedly used for ritual incense. You push open the heavy door expecting fragrance and sacred calm. What you get is stacked amphorae of wine, baskets of dates, a crate labelled donkey feed that turns out to be full of lapis amulets shaped like cats, and scrolls that absolutely should not be there. One of them contains a list of preferred donors ranked not by piety or offering size, but by influence. Noble houses, military officers, names that shouldn't be tied to religious gifting at all. Each entry is followed by a note. Access granted to inner shrine, or allowed to bless kittens. One entry even reads, request for statue placement during solstice denied, counter offer, cat statue to be hidden under obelisk for 6 nights. You're not even sure what that means, but it's shady. You present your findings to Hotep Kar, the high-ranking cat caretaker. He reads the scrolls in silence, lips tight, expression unreadable. When he finally speaks, his voice is low and taut. I warned them, he says. Bastet watches, even when you think she's sleeping. He pulls a small object from within his robes and presses it into your hand. A tiny clay seal shaped like a paw print. If you speak of this to others, wear that. It shows you are under her judgment, not theirs. You thank him, trying not to read too much into judgment. Here's the thing. Ancient Egypt had a complex relationship with religious power. Temples weren't just places of prayer, they were economic hubs, landowners, employers, banks, and the larger they grew, the more temptation crept in. Worship didn't always mean purity. In fact, some scholars believe the decline of Bastet's cult had as much to do with financial scandal as with shifting religious focus. You ask Renef if Bastet ever punished the corrupt. "Oh yes," he says, lips twitching. "There's a record of one treasurer found dead in a storeroom with his ledgers scattered around him. No wounds, no sign of poison, just a single cat sitting on his chest, purring." Urban legend? Maybe, but the temple keeps the ledgers locked in a box anyway. Even today, excavations have turned up storage rooms filled with cat mummies labelled inconsistently. Some contain genuine remains, well wrapped, preserved with care. Others, fabric scraps, pebbles, carved wood, an industry that started with sacred intent had, somewhere along the line, become a little sloppy. One theory suggests that in the later dynasties, the mass production of cat mummies was so out of control that demand far exceeded supply. Temple officials commissioned artists and embalmers to fabricate divine packages to maintain profits. People bought them, believing they were sacred, and left them at Bastet's shrines. Faith never faded, Renef says, but faith is easy to twist. You start noticing signs of reform. A new edict posted in the temple courtyard states that all offerings must now be confirmed by a priest and a cat guardian. A senior priestess publicly burns 2 scrolls labelled duplicate inventory, and there's a fresh smell of juniper cleansing the accounting room. But it's not all repentance. Later you catch a novice sneaking out of the storage wing with a tiny bronze cat figurine tucked into his belt sash. He locks eyes with you, hesitates, then disappears into the shadows. You don't report him. You just shake your head and make a mental note to offer extra milk tomorrow morning. Because here's the thing about cats, divine or not, they can't be bribed. They don't care about your ledgers, your offerings, or your fancy speeches. They know when they're being lied to, and if the goddess they embody is anything like them, she'll wait. She'll watch. And when the time comes, she'll act. Silently, swiftly, and without needing anyone's permission. That night, a striped cat curls up beside a pile of neglected scrolls near the back of the temple. No one sees her arrive, no one sees her leave, but by morning the storage door is mysteriously unlatched, and every misfiled offering is gone. In its place, a single paw print, pressed into wet ink, right across the name of the treasurer. The whispers start small, barely audible, like the flutter of a papyrus scroll in a lazy breeze. You catch the first one from a pair of old women hunched over a fruit stall, speaking in low tones while pretending to haggle over figs. "That town near the edge of the floodplain," one says. "The one with no dogs, no children playing in the streets anymore." The other nods. "Too many cats," she mutters. "They say the people stopped locking their doors for each other. Only for them." You lean closer, trying to catch more, but they fall silent. Just 2 villagers buying fruit. Harmless, right? But once you hear it, you can't unhear it. The whispers grow louder as you make your way back through the southern district. Priests exchanging furtive glances. Temple novices suddenly hush when you enter a room, Renef offering you a scroll with a warning. Read this one indoors, and not near the cats. The scroll is thin, faded with age, and unsigned. No official temple seal. The handwriting is rushed, erratic. It tells of a village near the Nile Delta, once devoted to Bastet above all other gods. Every home had a statue. Every family donated fish and wine and bits of gold to the temple's feline caretakers. Over time, cats became more than companions. They became rulers. And not just in spirit. The writer describes how villagers began offering their homes when cats showed interest, vacating entire rooms if one settled on a mat. Doors were left open for them, meals were made and never touched by human hands. Even births were delayed, midwives refusing to act if a cat wasn't present. She must witness the child's first breath, the scroll says, or it will not be welcome in this life. At first, it sounds like devotion taken to extremes, but as the scroll goes on, it shifts, the tone darkens. The cats stop sleeping in the temples and start watching from rooftops, windows, shadows. One woman claims her husband fell ill after swatting a kitten off the table. Another says her cousin disappeared after calling a cat just an animal. Then the line that chills you. It is not the goddess they serve anymore. It is something older, something that wears her shape like silk. You look up and find 3 cats staring at you through the scriptorium window. You don't move, neither do they. You dig deeper, quietly. You talk to traders who've passed through this so-called rebel village, though no one calls it that out loud. They refer to it only with vague titles: the place of tales, the quiet fields, the town that meows. One man tells you he stopped there for water once and left before sunset. Too many eyes, he says, and none of them human. Another swears he saw cats escorting a man down the main road, not beside him, behind him, herding him like sheep. He walked like he didn't know it, the man says, but his steps matched theirs exactly. There are fringe accounts like this tucked between more mundane temple records, always brief, always unsigned. One document refers to cults within the cult, suggesting not everyone in Bastet's following worshipped her in the same way. Some believed her divinity was a gateway to something less benevolent, more primal, a force not of protection or fertility but dominance, ownership. You begin noticing more cats than usual in the temple city. They gather in corners, rooftops, windowsills, watching, not lounging, not preening, just staring. One priestess says it's a good omen. They are guarding the city, she insists. They always do before a change. You ask what kind of change. She just smiles and walks away. Even Nofret, your sharp-tongued teenage guide, grows uneasy. There's a feeling, she says one morning, like they're waiting for something. She doesn't elaborate. The tension builds quietly. Then one night a cat bites a priest. Not a scratch, not a warning paw swipe. A bite, clean, deep, right on the wrist during evening prayer. The man stumbles back in shock, bleeding. The cat sits calmly, licking its paw. You're there, watching, frozen. Hotepka steps in quickly, bowing to the cat, muttering a prayer. The injured priest is escorted out, his arm bandaged with cloth soaked in milk and saffron. You expect anger, punishment, but the priest insists he's fine. I must have offended her, he says, voice up trembling. The fault is mine. That's when it hits you. This isn't a rebellion in the traditional sense. There are no banners, no chants, no raised fists. This is quiet conquest. Reverence turned inside out. And the people? They're going along with it. Not because they believe any less, but because their belief has shifted. Bastet, the nurturing goddess, has evolved. Or been replaced. Or perhaps she was always both. You spend the next evening sitting beside the southern wall near the gate that faces the river. Cats slink past you one by one, tails brushing your sandals. A black tomcat stops and looks up at you, blinks slowly. You speak aloud. Is this what you wanted? He yawns, walks away. The moon rises over the city. You hear no birds, no children laughing. Just the occasional hiss, the flutter of paw against stone, and the soft sound of sandals avoiding the centre of the street. Later, as you prepare for sleep, you find a small object placed beside your mat. A carved wooden cat, its eyes painted gold, its mouth open slightly. Inside you find a slip of papyrus. It reads, "She no longer needs to be worshipped, only obeyed." You blow out the lamp. You do not dream. By now you're convinced that every time you think you've reached the edge of feline weirdness in ancient Egypt, someone lifts another dusty curtain and reveals a whole new corridor of mystery, often literally. Today's curtain leads to the docks, where a river trader named Hemu has agreed to let you accompany him on a Nile voyage. You expect to load cargo, maybe hear a few stories, soak in the breeze. You do not expect to meet the ship's most important crew member before the captain. Her name is Kahi. She's small, golden-furred, and currently sleeping on a coil of rope as if she invented maritime law. Hemu points to her and says without irony, "She outranks me. If she doesn't board, we don't sail." You think he's joking. He isn't. It turns out cats weren't just tolerated aboard Nile boats. They were considered essential. Bastet's favour didn't stop at temple doors. Her protection extended over trade routes, cargo ships, and fishing vessels. Kahi, like many boat cats, isn't just a companion. She's an omen, a guardian, a feline compass. She chooses where the boat docks. She dictates which route the crew takes around shallow bends. One sailor swears she once meowed precisely 8 times before a storm. They took shelter early. Every other ship on the river that day, delayed or damaged. She listens to the river, Hemu tells you as you help tie down a bundle of grain jars. More than we do. You set sail just after sunrise. The Nile glitters under a pale sky, its surface like a giant bronze mirror. Kahi wanders the deck, tail high, ears swivelling. The crew gives her a wide berth. When she sits beside the rudder, Hemu changes course slightly. No one questions it. The ancient Egyptians believed the Nile was a living force, and cats, being part divine, could communicate with it. If a cat refused to board a ship, it was seen as a warning. If one leapt from the boat mid-journey, it meant danger was coming. There are records, some preserved on temple walls, of captains offering food, silver, even prayers to entice a cat to join them. One scroll mentions an entire voyage postponed 3 days until the cat's preferred fish became available. As the boat glides downriver, the mood is calm, except Kahi. She paces the length of the deck, meows once, and perches on a barrel of dates. The crew stiffens. Hemu immediately reroutes the ship around a sandbar he hadn't planned to avoid. 10 minutes later, you spot broken reeds in the water, a hidden obstruction that might have wrecked the hull. The crew offers Kahi a fresh sardine. She declines. Of course. You ask one of the younger deckhands if all boat cats are like this. Not all, he says. Some are just cats. But others, he trails off, others are Bastet, just in smaller doses. That seems to be the running theme. The lines blur out here on the water. Religion is not confined to temples. It moves, floats, wears fur and lies on nets. You're told some traders refuse to count their coins unless the cat is watching. Others won't touch new cargo until it's sniffed by their ship cat. There's even a bizarre tradition of asking the cat permission to drink wine on feast days. If the cat sneezes, it's a yes. If it walks away, you stick with water. There's a fringe legend, you're told, around the campfire after the boat anchors near a quiet riverbank for the night. The fire crackles, the stars spill across the sky, and someone brings out date beer. Hemu leans close and says, "Some say there's a ship that only appears on moonless nights. Silent, black sails, no crew except cats." You smirk. "I'm serious," he insists. "They say it sails between the realms of the living and the dead, carrying messages for Bastet, or warnings. If you see it, you drop to your knees. You don't look the cats in the eye. If you're lucky, they pass you by. If not..." He makes a slashing gesture across his throat. Dramatic, sure, but no one else laughs. One crew member chimes in with a tale of a sailor who stole from a shrine. Gold, nothing big, just an amulet. Thought he'd gotten away with it. The next morning he woke up to find his boat crawling with cats, dozens, maybe hundreds. Silent, still, staring. He returned the amulet the same day, walked it all the way back upriver barefoot. Said the silence was the worst part. And then there's the boat itself. Many river vessels have small shrines carved into their bow, some for Isis, others for Ra. But Hemu's boat, it has a tiny gilded figure of Bastet nestled inside the captain's cabin, surrounded by dried flowers and 3 small fish bones arranged in a fan. It's not just for show. Each night Kahi touches her nose to the figure before curling up near the tiller. You realise the boat isn't just sacred because it's a vessel, it's sacred because the cat is here. Her presence turns the ship into a moving temple. Wherever she is, the goddess is. And wherever the goddess is, you don't make mistakes. You don't swear loudly, you don't complain about the heat. You definitely don't touch the cargo without asking first. It's not superstition. It's protocol. The next morning, Kahi wakes early, climbs the mast, and yowls at nothing. Hemu takes this as a sign to dock early. You pull into a quiet village just as another trader rushes in, shouting of a collapsed embankment a few miles upriver. 2 boats damaged. Yours is untouched. No one says thank you to the cat. They just place a bowl of cream near her favourite sun patch and offer her silence. You do the same. When it's time to part ways, Kahi actually walks up to you. She headbutts your leg, once, then returns to her perch without a glance back. Hemu smiles. She's never done that to a passenger before. You smile back, and silently promise to never board a boat without checking for paw prints first. You're back on solid ground now, your legs still swaying slightly from days on the Nile, but your destination today is far more grounded, and far more unnerving. You've been invited to observe a ritual held only once every lunar cycle, the Judgment of the Dead, conducted not for the kings and nobles laid in gilded tombs, but for common folk, the bakers, fishmongers, potters and goat herders who still want a little divine attention when they cross to the next life. And yes, as you've probably guessed by now, cats are involved. Heavily. The Temple of Bastet has a side chamber you haven't seen before. It's cool and dark, lit only by blue-tinged lanterns that flicker against walls carved with rows of feline figures, all of them seated, tails curled, heads tilted just slightly, like they're listening, watching, judging, No statues of Anubis here, no jackals, no scales, no hearts weighed against feathers. This is Bastet's domain, and her courtroom is silent. You're told to remove your sandals before entering. The priest leading the ceremony, thin, pale, and wrapped in silver-dyed linen, doesn't say much, just points to a mat and instructs you to sit. Around you, a semicircle of mourners kneels beside a wrapped figure. The deceased is a woman, her hands painted with henna, a necklace of tiny fish bones resting on her chest. She was a midwife, someone whispers. Beloved, devout, loved cats. Apparently that last part matters a lot. The priest lights a cone of incense and begins the ritual. Soft chanting in an older dialect, one you barely recognise, fills the chamber. And then, as if summoned by the words alone, the cats arrive. 3 of them. One pure white, one ash grey, and one so dark it seems to absorb the firelight. They move in with purpose, not guided, not prompted. They just know just know. The white cat circles the body. The grey one curls beside the mourner who's openly weeping. And the black one? She hops onto the platform and settles at the head of the deceased. This is the beginning of the judgment. The belief here is simple, elegantly terrifying. While Anubis and Osiris reign over the grand courtroom of Maat, Bastet offers something different, a quieter kind of evaluation. For those who lived humble lives, never gaining access to elaborate tombs or priestly rites, Bastet sends her cats to observe, to decide. Not based on status, but on behaviour, kindness, balance, intuition. You ask quietly, what happens if the cats reject someone? The priest doesn't answer, but one of the mourners looks at you with haunted eyes and murmurs, then the journey ends before it begins. You're not sure what that means. The ritual continues. Offerings are made, fish, milk, a small woven blanket, clearly worn, likely one the woman used to sleep beneath. The cats do not react, they simply remain. Still, present. Eyes half-lidded, yet fully aware. Then something strange happens. The grey cat stands and begins to walk in a slow, deliberate circle around the body. Once, twice, 3 times. She stops, meows once. The priest nods. She is accepted. The mood in the room shifts like a wave of wind passing through silk. Relief floods the mourners. Someone lets out a breath they didn't know they were holding. The priest offers a final prayer, seals the offering dish with wax, and places it beside the deceased's head. The cats vanish as quietly as they came. Later you ask Renef if this is common. More than you think, he says. Not every judgment is formal. Sometimes a cat will simply appear at the foot of a dying person's bed. Stay there. Watch. That is considered a sign of passage. And if no cat comes, he shrugs. Then it means their soul must face another path, perhaps harsher, perhaps delayed. There are stories, ones you find scratched into the margins of old funerary scrolls, about individuals who bribed cat handlers to borrow sacred cats for the ritual. It never ended well. One scroll simply notes, "He stole her gaze, she returned it sharpened." Another mentions a thief whose judgment cat scratched his face before turning and walking away. He died before sunrise, reportedly with claw marks still visible. You learn about a rare role in the temple called the Whiskered Witness. These are not priests, they're individuals chosen, usually by the cats themselves, to attend deathbeds, bearing feline company. They say little, sleep even less, and are almost always seen with at least one cat nearby. One such witness, a woman named Pamiu, is said to have sat with over 100 souls. She never spoke during their passing, just waited until the cat moved, then she left. Some modern scholars brush all this aside as metaphor. They argue that cats, being naturally drawn to warmth and quiet, often appeared at moments of stillness, like death. Others counter that in a culture where spiritual and physical worlds constantly overlapped, feline presence wasn't coincidence, it was confirmation. You can't stop thinking about the black cat who sat at the woman's head. She didn't move the entire ceremony, didn't blink, she simply watched. And now, back in your chamber, her image lingers. When you close your eyes, you see her perched there, silent, eternal, guarding something you'll never fully understand. You lie down. The room is still. Then a weight. Small, warm, soft. A cat has climbed onto your chest. She lies down, purrs once, and you feel a strange calm wash over you, heavy and final and kind. You don't dare open your eyes. You don't need to. You've been seen. You're not sure what you expect when the temple elders mention a ruler who walked against the cats. Maybe a confused reformer, some poor soul who misunderstood the rituals, or a foreign-born noble who preferred dogs. What you do not expect is a full dossier on a pharaoh Nebem-Hotep II with ink-scorched records, half-erased murals, and stories that make priests squint toward the floor and mutter, "We do not speak of him." But you're you. You dig anyway. Nebem-Hotep came to power during a time of drought, civil unrest, and growing fatigue with the endless obligations to temples and gods. And he had ideas, dangerous ones, reform, efficiency, streamlining the divine, as one document phrased it. He believed too many resources were tied up in religious offerings, especially to Bastet. He saw temples bursting with fish, oils and linen while farmers starved in their fields. He wanted to redistribute that wealth. Noble goal, terrible execution. It started with cuts to feline-related festivals. Fewer sacred cats assigned to households, less incense burned during the Night of Whispers. And then, heresy of heresies, he shut down a temple entirely. Not a major one, but a modest shrine to Bastet in a border village. He ordered the cats there released into the wild. "They are animals," he reportedly said, "not oracles." That quote, by the way, is carved into a broken tablet found beneath the remains of his summer palace. It's the only surviving piece of that structure. Everything else was scorched to dust. You press Renef for details. He groans, rubs his temples, and finally says, "Let me show you something." He leads you down into one of the lowest archive chambers, a place where even the scribes go reluctantly. The walls are covered in faded warnings. Not curses, not traps, just reminders. Words like humility, balance, remembrance. In the centre is a small statue. At first it seems like any other, feline, elegant, obsidian. But the inscription beneath it is odd. She watched him speak, and then she waited. When the time came, she moved her paw. That's all it says, but nearby someone, centuries ago, added a line in red ink, barely legible now. The throne held no warmth after her tail passed beneath it. You ask what it means. Renef doesn't answer directly, just tells you the story the old priests whisper to each other when the wind is high and the cats are restless. After Nebem-Hotep's cuts, strange things started happening. The palace cats, once silent companions, grew agitated. One reportedly attacked the vizier during a council meeting. Another was found sitting atop the king's wine cup, unmoving, hissing whenever anyone tried to remove it. The pharaoh declared it an omen of jealousy from temple priests. "They train these beasts to make me look weak," he spat, according to one scribe. But then came the real blow. The royal cat, Tefnah, a sand-coloured feline who had lived beside the king since his coronation, vanished. No warning, no signs of escape. One morning her cushion was empty. The palace panicked. Offerings were made, rooms cleansed. Still nothing. 3 days later the Nile receded unusually fast. Boats grounded, fish disappeared. The nearby town was swallowed by sand after a freak storm. The priests begged Nebem-Hotep to make amends. He refused. He issued a proclamation. The goddess no longer rules. The king speaks alone. That very night he was found dead in his chamber. No wounds, no marks, just wide-eyed, face contorted, arms rigid at his sides. And beside him, according to the most persistent version of the tale, was Tefnah, silent, grooming her paws. You raise a brow. Coincidence, you ask? Renef just shrugs. Perhaps, but who buried him? You frown. The priests? No, Renef says. No one. There is no tomb for Nebem-Hotep II, no burial chamber, no funerary rites. His name was struck from temple records, his statue buried upside down, and his successor declared chosen by the goddess to restore balance. That successor built 3 new Bastet shrines within the first year of rule. One of them sits on the very foundation of the Nebem-Hotep's lost palace. Modern Egyptologists are divided. Some believe the story is myth, an example of political propaganda spun into divine justice. Others point to the rapid decline in cat-related temple interference in the century following Nebem-Hotep's death. Something shifted. Something made future rulers extremely careful about where they stepped and what they said. There's even an odd little scarab charm unearthed in Memphis engraved with the phrase, the paw has memory. No one knows exactly when it was made or who commissioned it, but it's been found in over a dozen burial sites from different periods, always near the feet. You spend hours reading fractured scrolls about the king's downfall. Every version ends differently. In one, he begged for forgiveness. In another, he tried to sacrifice a cat to prove his dominance and was strangled in his sleep. In yet another, he was simply erased, so thoroughly and so efficiently that his legacy survives only in whispers, shadows, and scattered fragments of ruined stone. But every version agrees on one thing: the cats never returned to the palace. They stayed at the temples, where they belonged. That night you passed by the statue in the low chamber again. The one with no eyes, just a smooth face and that single sentence. She waited. You pause, listen, and for just a moment you think you hear something. A soft sound like claws on stone, a low purr echoing from behind the walls. You turn, nothing's there, but you bow anyway, because you're not Nebem-Hotep, and you'd like to keep it that way. You'd think that after 24 temple tours, a military cat parade, and a ghost feline encounter or 3, you'd have hit the ceiling on cat-related surprises in ancient Egypt. But nope. Today you're standing in a chamber painted wall-to-wall in swirling hieroglyphs and unfamiliar gods, and every single one of them has one thing in common. They've got a tail. This is the meow mix of gods, as Renef jokingly calls it, a quiet, rarely visited annex of the temple reserved for transitional iconography. Translation: the stuff they weren't quite sure what to do with. The walls are littered with strange hybrids. Bastet's face fused with goddesses you don't recognise. One mural shows her bridging with Hathor, complete with cow horns and a feline snarl. Another pairs her with Sekhmet mid-transformation, half purring, half roaring, and the further you look the weirder it gets. One god has 6 eyes, another has 2 tails. One looks like a lioness with wings and a halo of stars, cradling a kitten in one hand and a bloody sword in the other. Renef explains this is where the lines blur, where feline divinity spills beyond Bastet and into other pantheons. Cats were so important, they didn't stay in one lane, he says. They infiltrated everything. You glance around at the half-feline, half-everything figures and wonder if infiltrate is putting it mildly. Turns out Bastet wasn't always separate from the rest. In some periods, she was a composite, a piece of a larger divine puzzle. Her feline identity was applied like gold leaf, layered onto whatever aspect needed softening or sharpening. In certain regional temples, Bastet was invoked not as a standalone goddess, but as an aspect of Isis, the mother goddess. In others, she took on attributes of Ma'at, the personification of cosmic order. Even Thoth, god of wisdom, scribe of the gods, is depicted once or twice with a cat's head instead of his usual ibis, though scholars argue over whether this was a local variation or a scribe having a very bad day. You find a cracked slab in the corner, its edges worn smooth. On it, a procession of cats is shown walking beside Anubis. Not just beside him, they're leading him, guiding the god of the dead. Renef points to it and says, that's the Temple of Two Shadows. Supposedly a short-lived sect that believed Bastet led souls to judgment, not Anubis. That her cats carried the truth of a person's car in their eyes. One look and they'd know. Modern historians argue fiercely over this. Some say these syncretic forms were nothing more than local deviations, artistic experiments by creative priests or ambitious temple painters. Others think it reflects something deeper, that feline divinity was so pervasive it naturally seeped into every corner of religious thought. In a world already built on layers of meaning, adding a cat's gaze to a god's identity wasn't just logical, it was necessary. And then there are the foreign gods. You're led to a room deeper in the temple annex, dimly lit, heavy with the smell of old resin and long-extinguished oil lamps. On one wall, a Greek-style mural has been added post-conquest. It shows the goddess Artemis, bow in hand, flowing robe, and at her feet, a lynx, not a hunting dog, not a deer, a cat. In another corner there's a Persian-inspired relief of Anahita, goddess of waters and fertility, flanked by 2 large wildcats, each wearing lotus crowns. Renef taps this one. Imported reverence, he says. Foreign dignitaries came bearing their own cat worship traditions, and Egypt said, we can work with that. Egypt wasn't just influencing the world with cats, it was absorbing the world's own feline reverence and remixing it. Trading routes brought spices, jewellery and strange ideas, and everywhere those ships went, someone, somewhere brought a cat. The Greeks had their own sacred felines. The Persians worshipped divine lions. Even the Nubians had cat-like totems in their older mythologies. In Egypt, all of it got stirred into the divine stew. Renef hands you a rolled scroll from a dusty shelf labelled Unconfirmed Syncretisms. You unroll it carefully. On the papyrus, two gods face each other. One, clearly Bastet, her feline head serene and watchful. The other, a shape-shifting god from a faraway land, part snake, part jackal, cloaked in feathers and stars. Between them, a cat sits. No adornment, no explanation. She might be the bridge, Renef murmurs, or the lock. You ask if anyone still worships these blended forms. Not openly, he says, but there are groups, hermit priests, desert dwellers who believe the purest form of Bastet isn't found in statues, but in transformation. You don't know what to do with that. The temple has always presented Bastet as a singular, stable figure. Protector, nurturer, judge. But here, in the dusty margins of doctrine, she's fluid. She shifts. She inhabits other gods like a whisper in their ear. She doesn't ask to be included. She just is. Later you find a tablet depicting a ritual called the Festival of the Veiled Cat. According to the inscription, it was a celebration held once every 7 years in a now vanished city near the Red Sea. During the festival, priests would wear feline masks, not of Bastet, but of other gods, gods you've never heard of. Names worn smooth by time, their purpose, to remind people that divinity was not fixed, that the cat could be anyone. That night, in your chamber, you see a cat curled near the window, pale grey, eyes shining. Not one you've seen before. You blink. She's gone. You check the floor. No paw prints, but on your pillow someone has placed a small clay charm. 2 faces on one head. One smiles, the other stares blankly ahead. You lie down slowly and wonder, was she Bastet or someone else entirely? There's a particular smell that hits you before you even see the place. Something musky, spiced, and just a little bit wrong, not rotting exactly. More like a perfume trying to cover something that doesn't want to stay hidden. The scent leads you down a narrow alley off the western trade route, where sandstone walls lean in a little too close, and windows have curtains that don't twitch, even when you know someone's watching. You've been told, carefully, quietly, that this is where the cat smugglers operate. Yes, you heard that right. Cat smugglers, in ancient Egypt. You'd expect black market gold, grain, maybe forbidden scrolls. But here, the most profitable contraband? Divine furballs. It starts with a doorway, simple, unmarked. You knock not really knowing what you're doing, and it swings open just enough for someone to hiss, "You're late." You're pulled inside by a man named Intef, whose robes are clean but whose hands are not. He has ink-stained fingers, the kind that usually belong to a scribe, except this guy isn't copying hymns, he's drawing permits, forged ones. You're in what could only be described as a divine smuggling ring's office. Scrolls are everywhere. Not sacred ones, logistical, inventories, names of buyers, transit routes, feed costs. Some are marked with little cat doodles, which feels cute until you realise it's probably a code for breed, size or level of holiness. Intef explains the basics without much prompting. The temple cats, especially those bred from high-ranking lines, aren't just worshipped. They're coveted. Foreign dignitaries want them. Nobles from distant provinces want them. Even some rival temples try to get them under the table, but the state forbids it. Officially, sacred cats cannot be sold, traded or exported. To do so is to offend Bastet herself. But if there's one thing humans are good at, it's breaking rules for profit. There's more demand than ever, Intef says as he unrolls a chart showing various temple districts. Everyone wants a temple cat in their home. They think it brings protection, luck, fertility. One man offered his daughter's dowry for a single black kitten from the Bastet line. He pauses. We sold him a ginger, painted its nose. You blink. He shrugs. And that's just the soft end of the operation. In a back room you meet a woman named Hasina, who's feeding a room full of kittens with dropwood tools carved from ivory. She's gentle, precise, almost maternal, but she also keeps a small branding iron on the table, just in case she needs to mark the premium ones. You ask what that means. People want authenticity, she says. They want to believe they're touching the divine. It gets darker. Some smugglers have been caught stealing cats directly from temple precincts, slipping in during festivals when crowds are thick, or bribing low-ranking acolytes to misplace a kitten for the right price. Others breed lookalikes, feeding them temple incense to try and mimic the sacred scent. One group even staged a fake oracle event, convincing villagers their hand-raised cat was a divine messenger. They charged 3 goats per meow. And what happens when they're caught? Public shaming usually, Intef says. Sometimes lashings. One man had to shave his eyebrows and recite an apology scroll in the middle of the Bastet festival. He grins. Still tried again 6 months later. You ask how Bastet reacts to all this. Intef's grin fades. She reacts, he says, quietly. He tells you about a courier who tried to smuggle a pregnant temple cat across the border in a woven basket. Got caught in a sandstorm. No one found his body, just the cat, alive, resting beneath his empty cloak. There's another tale, hard to verify but persistent, of a noble family in Thebes that acquired a sacred kitten through a smuggler. Within a week, their livestock stopped producing milk, their servants fled. The youngest son swore he saw the cat watching him from the rafters, its eyes glowing. Eventually the family sent the kitten back, but the temple refused to take it. It's hers now, the high priest had said. You'll have to live with what you invited. Some modern archaeologists have unearthed curious signs of this underground trade. Scratched out inscriptions where feline names once appeared, tiny bone fragments in homes far from temple precincts, and even amulets with counterfeit blessings. One infamous find includes a storage jar marked "Sacred Milk Handle with Piety" that when opened contained nothing but grain and a dried mouse skull. Someone had tried to forge a sacred food offering. It didn't end well for the merchant. Back in the smuggler's den, Hesna shows you a cloth-wrapped bundle hidden beneath her table. Inside are 3 kittens, blue-eyed, trembling, impossibly small. Born yesterday, she says. No temple markings yet, that's the trick. Move them before anyone knows they exist. You ask if she believes in Bastet. She hesitates, then says, I believe she sees everything. There's silence. A cat, older, grey-furred, with a scar across one eye, walks into the room. No one summoned it, no one expected it. It pads across the floor, sniffs the table, and locks eyes with Hesina. She drops to her knees. You stand there stunned, while the grey cat climbs onto her lap and purrs, loud, resonant, like a drumbeat. She's been gone a year, Hesna whispers. We thought she was dead. Intef goes pale. We gave her to a captain. He said she drowned. No one speaks. The cat looks at you, then hops off Hesna's lap, circles the room once and walks out. That night, Hesina shuts down her operation. No announcement, no fight. She burns her scrolls, sets the kittens free in the temple garden, and vanishes into the southern hills. When you return to the temple, you find a small stone left on your bed, a carved image of a paw print, with a faint trail of dots behind it. You don't ask who left it. You just sleep with it beside you, because the goddess watches, even on the black market. You wake before dawn to the sound of drumming, slow, methodical, like a heartbeat echoing down stone corridors. It's not the usual temple rhythm. This one has weight, authority. You throw on your linen robe and follow the sound barefoot through the shadowed courtyard and into the Hall of Judgment. Only today, it's not a soul being judged. It's a cat, not metaphorically, not as a symbolic stand-in for some deeper meaning. No, there is an actual feline standing on a raised dais, tail upright, facing a semicircle of priests. And not just any cat, this is Wenu, one of the oldest and most revered temple cats in Bubastis. She's silver-furred, sharp-eyed, and known to have once bitten a visiting governor for trying to pet her without permission. Apparently it's her turn to die. Renef appears at your side like a ghost in sandals. Today is the day of farewell, he whispers. She's lived 18 years, seen 5 high priests come and go. She chose this morning. You don't know what that means. She chose? Renef doesn't elaborate. Instead, you watch as the ceremony begins. The lead priest, draped in the ceremonial bronze and dyed leopard skin, begins to chant. Not to Wenu, but for her. A hymn of thanks, of reverence, a life remembered in verse, and he speaks of her service to Bastet, her daily walks through the shrine. the way she meowed once before every solar eclipse. The chamber is silent, save for the chant and the rhythmic purring of Wenu herself. You learn that when a sacred cat nears the end of its life, it signals the priests by entering the Hall of Farewell on its own. No one carries it, no one forces it. If the cat chooses not to enter, it dies as it wishes, where it wishes, but when it does enter, the priest must prepare for burial. This isn't simple interment. It's mummification, full honours, the same rites given to nobles, sometimes more elaborate. The belief is that sacred cats return directly to Bastet's embrace, carrying with them the prayers and hopes of everyone they've touched. They become messengers, not just of the temple, but of all who knew them. You ask if Wenu will be buried in the cat necropolis you've heard whispers about. Renef nods. She'll have a chamber of her own, she earned that right. You've heard rumours of these mass feline burial sites. Tombs filled with thousands of mummified cats, each carefully wrapped, some interred with jewellery, amulets, or tiny statues. You thought they were legend, but now you're invited to see it for yourself. The next day, you follow Renef and a small funeral procession down a winding path beyond the temple walls. The cat's body, freshly wrapped in fine linen and anointed with frankincense, rests in a cedar box adorned with gold filigree. It's carried on a low litter, surrounded by flickering lamps and bowls of milk. Not a human voice speaks, only the cats make sound, meows, soft and frequent, as if reciting a liturgy in their own language, and eventually you arrive. The entrance to the necropolis is carved into a cliff face, simple, unassuming. No grand statues, just a single feline figure etched above the arch, its eyes filled with stars. Inside it's cold and vast. The smell is not unpleasant. Resin, salt, myrrh. The walls are lined with niches, and in every one a mummified cat rests, some wrapped in plain cloth, others adorned with gilded masks. There are shelves of wooden boxes shaped like cats, dozens of tiny sarcophagi, each with painted whiskers and protective spells. This is only the first chamber, Renef whispers. The deeper you go, the more elaborate the tombs become. Some cats were clearly treasured beyond belief. You find one with its own altar, offering still intact. Bowls of dried fish, carved birds, tiny cushions. Another rests beneath a canopy of blue glass with gold thread woven into its wrappings. Renef tells you this cat once belonged to a queen who swore it saved her life during childbirth. You can't help but wonder how many lives these cats lived. How many human souls tied their fates to a flick of a tail or a single glance? There's a debate among scholars about the sheer number of mummified cats unearthed at sites like Saqqara and Bubastis. Some believe the industry became commercialised, with animals bred solely for burial. Others argue the majority were genuine temple cats, honoured with sincerity. Recent digs have even uncovered specialised embalming stations built just for felines. But here in this chamber, it doesn't feel like mass production. It feels like reverence. The procession stops at an open niche, freshly carved. Wenu's cedar box is placed inside, surrounded by flowers, incense cones, and a small bronze bell, the same one she wore around her neck when she was young. A priest steps forward and reads her final blessing. May your steps be light. May your paws find the lap of the goddess. And then silence. One by one, the cats who came with the procession curl up near the tomb's entrance, watching, waiting. Some stay long after the humans have left. You linger behind, overcome by the sense that this isn't just a burial. It's a handoff, a passing of wisdom of unseen power from one feline to the next. Later you ask Renef what happens next. A new one will rise, he says. Always does. We don't choose her. She chooses us. And sure enough, by the time you return to the temple, there's a tiny black kitten sleeping on the main altar. No one knows where she came from. No one dares move her. You bend to stroke her back. She opens her eyes, golden and ancient. By now, you've seen cats worshipped, judged, buried with honours, and possibly imbued with the power to smite entire dynasties. But what you haven't seen, not yet, is a cat become a god right in front of your eyes. That's what today is about. No temple rituals, no incense haze, just a town square, a painted platform, and one very unbothered tabby named Jesseret, currently licking her paw like she hasn't been declared a living incarnation of Bastet. The festival is called the Day of Manifestation. It only happens once every 24 years, when the high priests and priestesses announce that the goddess has taken temporary form in a living cat. And this year, Gesseret, who, according to the temple gossip, wandered in from the reeds behind the granary one morning and promptly claimed a priest's favourite cushion. Within a week, every other cat had vacated her space. She began sitting on the altar uninvited. And when a young novice tripped during a reading, Gesseret leapt into his lap and began purring so loudly he forgot his panic and finished the verse perfectly. That's how you get the job, apparently. The idea of a living goddess cat isn't new, but it's rare. The title Netjeret Ira, meaning divine one of the sun, is only given when a cat is believed to be more than just sacred, when she's Bastet herself, walking the earth, not a symbol, not a representative, the real deal, a literal deity wrapped in fur and attitude. The town has transformed. Everywhere you turn, banners flutter with Gesseret's likeness. Gold stripes, green eyes, tail curled like a question mark. Merchants sell amulets shaped like her. Children wear clay masks with tiny feline noses. You spot a potter offering blessed dishes that promise to make even spoiled lentils taste divine. The level of devotion is matched only by the level of unfiltered capitalism. Renef's beside you, chewing date bread. This is the part where everyone goes temporarily insane, he mumbles. You ask if he believes she really is Bastet. He doesn't answer, just shrugs and says, "She picked her cushion, didn't she?" The festival lasts 3 days. On the first, Gesseret is paraded through the town on a litter, carried by 6 heavily perfumed priests. She wears a collar of lapis lazuli and rests on a silk cushion. Along the route, townspeople line up to kneel and offer gifts, fish, flowers, music. One woman bursts into tears just making eye contact. On the second day, the Oracle of the Poor is held. Here's how it works. People write questions on scraps of papyrus and place them in a circle around Gesseret. She's then set loose and allowed to wander. Whichever papyrus she touches is interpreted as the goddess's chosen question. That question is read aloud, and the high priestess, usually stone-faced, enters a trance to deliver Bastet's answer. You attend. You watch. One man asks if he should marry the girl from the weaver's quarter. Gesseret walks directly to his scroll, sits on it, and begins to purr. The crowd cheers. Another woman asks if her son should join the army. Gesseret hisses, knocks the scroll off the platform, and then walks away entirely. No one questions her judgment. On the third day, Gesseret disappears. It happens every time, Renef says. The cat is celebrated, exalted, revered, and then, on the final morning, gone. Without a trace. No paw prints, no hair, nothing but the scent of myrrh where her cushion once lay. They return to the goddess, Renef says, like it's a weather report. But this time something strange happens. Gesseret doesn't vanish. She stays. She stretches, yawns, hops off her pedestal, and walks back into the temple courtyard like she's clocking in for work. This has never happened before. The priests panic quietly. Plans were made, final hymns written, a whole divine disappearance speech was prepared. But Gesseret's still here, still grooming herself in full view of everyone. That night, an emergency meeting is called in the temple. You're not supposed to be there, but Renef waves you in with the solemn air of a man who knows things are about to get very strange, very fast. The high priestess says, "We don't know what it means." Another priest suggests the goddess is testing them. A third proposes she's not ready to leave because the people aren't ready to be without her. Then someone raises a chilling possibility. What if she's not Bastet? Everyone goes still. You realise just how risky this all is. When you declare a living god, you're gambling. If the cat leaves, clean ending, neat story. But if she stays, what if she begins to act outside of the expected divine patterns? What if she chooses to speak, or worse, not speak when she's expected to? Already people are demanding new oracles. Some want her installed permanently on the throne of the goddess. Others are whispering that she's not a divine incarnation at all, but a test sent by Bastet to see who truly believes. You ask Renef what usually happens when things get this blurry. People build a myth, he says. Then they try to control it, and when they can't, they rewrite it. The next morning, Gesseret is gone. But this time there's a message. Scratched into the clay tiles beside the altar is a single paw print, outlined in gold paint. Beneath it, a smear of wine. No human footprints nearby, no signs of entry or exit. Some say she returned to Bastet, others say she was Bastet, and decided to stay a while longer, watching from behind alley corners and papyrus stalks. The High Priestess issues a revised statement. She has chosen to remain unseen, but her eyes are still upon us. Merchants update their masks to show Gesseret with one eye closed, one open. Children now play a game where they leave fish and hide to see if it's taken before sunset. If it is, they say the goddess is near. And you find a small tuft of striped fur on your sleeping mat that night. You tuck it into your scroll case, and you don't ask questions, because when the goddess chooses to walk among you, you don't demand proof. You just leave the cushion out and wait. You're nearly at the end of your time in ancient Egypt. The sun hangs a little lower now. The temple's routines have started to feel familiar. Dawn prayers, the daily brushing of sacred fur, incense smoke drifting through corridors like lazy ghosts. But today isn't about rituals or judgment or some poor pharaoh being paw-slapped into divine silence. Today is about memory, specifically how the Egyptians remembered their cats, not just in mummified bundles or golden statues, but in the raw, complicated ways only grief can create. It starts when a priestess named Merit leads you through a side gate you hadn't noticed before. The path winds past the main sanctuaries, through a stand of tall papyrus, and opens into a walled garden. But there's no altar here, no crowd, just silence, quiet as snowfall, and tombstones. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, each one small, no taller than your knee, some carved from alabaster, some from terracotta, some just sun-baked mud brick, their inscriptions faint and crumbling, but everyone bears the shape of a cat. This is the Garden of the Departed Whiskers, Merit says, not joking. That's its real name, a cemetery reserved for non-sacred cats. Not temple animals, not oracles, just companions, pet. You feel something tighten in your chest. She walks you to a marker shaped like a curled cat, its face rubbed smooth by centuries of wind. The inscription reads, "To Titi, who slept beside me through 13 harvests and never judged my snoring." You laugh, quietly, then realise your throat's tight. Merit explains that while sacred cats were mummified and entombed in temple crypts, the everyday cats, the kitchen hunters, the lap warmers, the ones who knocked over ink pots and purred through funerals, got their own kind of remembrance. Families who could afford it would commission small markers. Some included poems, others had crude little statues placed above the burial site. Most had names, all had stories. There's a tablet that reads, "For Baku, who chased demons from the nursery." Another says, "To Senna, who returned after drowning and lived 2 lives." You sit beside one marked only with a simple drawing, a paw print and a spiral sun. No words, no name, just a symbol of light and presence. Merit says some owners couldn't bear to write names, believing that doing so would pin the spirit down. It's not sadness, really, she says. It's recognition. Grief in our world is part of devotion. She leads you to a tomb with carvings of 2 cats nuzzling each other, tails entwined. This one's famous, she says. They were siblings, always together. One died during the flood season. The others stopped eating, died 5 days later. The family buried them together and left dried lotus petals every month. You ask how the cats are buried here. Mummified? Cremated? Some, she says. Most were simply wrapped, linen and herbs. The family would light a candle, say a prayer, and whisper the cat's favourite sound. Favourite sound, you ask? Some liked clapping, some liked the sound of a bell. One family used to meow 3 times and then say goodbye. It's overwhelming in a quiet way. You'd seen gods in fur, you'd seen cats decide wars, end kings, guide the dead. But here they're just loved, deeply, humbly, grief laid bare beneath the Egyptian sun. There's a debate in modern archaeology about the line between sacred and domestic in Egyptian feline culture. Some scholars argue that there was no line, that every cat, temple-bound or not, existed somewhere on a spectrum of divinity. Others believe the distinction was sharp. A temple cat was divine, a home cat merely beloved. But if this cemetery proves anything, it's that the people didn't care about distinctions. They loved the animals as beings, not symbols. In one corner of the garden, a family has left small toys, miniature wooden mice, a painted feather on a string, and a cracked bowl with faded milk stains. You ask Merit who maintains the garden. She gestures to a young girl sitting in the shade nearby, combing the fur of a sleepy grey tomcat. Her family's done it for 5 generations, Merit says. It's passed down like land or jewellery. She knows every name here. You wave. The girl smiles and meows at you. The tomcat lifts its head, blinks slowly, then resumes napping. As you walk back toward the main temple, you pass one final marker. This one stands taller than the rest, shaped like an obelisk with the image of a human hand touching a cat's paw. There's only one sentence carved beneath it. She stayed with me until the end, and I followed her into the dark. No name, no owner, just mutual devotion, etched in stone. That night, in your chamber, a cat you haven't seen before slips in through the open window. Pale beige, long tail, faint scar near its ear. It doesn't meow, just hops onto your bed, curls against your side and falls asleep. You don't move, you don't ask who it is. You just lie there, listening to its breathing, thinking about all the names carved in stone, all the stories wrapped in linen, all the love passed quietly between species across time. Because whether they were gods, guides, hunters, or nuisances, the cats of ancient Egypt were remembered not just for their divinity, but for their presence, their comfort, their absolute unshakable catness. And maybe that was always the point. Maybe being loved, truly and fully, was the highest form of worship. And now, as the stars settle above ancient Egypt and the last echoes of temple drums fade into the night, you find yourself lying quietly, the sand cool beneath your back, the scent of lotus and burning myrrh drifting on a soft desert breeze. Somewhere not far off, a cat pads silently across the stones. Her paw steps invisible, her purpose unknown, her presence unquestionable. You've walked through firelit rituals and moonlit tombs. You've seen rulers fall, thieves tremble, oracles emerge from lazy naps, and entire cities pause for a single twitch of a feline tail. What began as curiosity, why cats were gods and could kill you, has turned into something softer, stranger, deeper. The truth, if there is one, is layered like the linen wrap of a cat mummy. It smells of reverence, of fear, of devotion stitched tightly to something unknowable. Ancient Egypt didn't just like cats. It didn't just worship them. It folded them into the very bones of its culture. Into religion, medicine, magic, justice, war, life, death, and love. These creatures, half domestic and half divine, blurred every line humans tried to draw. They made the sacred feel close, and the everyday feel holy. And sometimes, when the world tipped too far into arrogance or forgetfulness, they reminded people, in claw or curse, that divinity does not purr on command. So if you ever see a cat watching you a little too closely, or if one curls beside you without cause, ask yourself, are you being chosen, or are you being judged? Either way, best to offer milk. And maybe bow. Now pull the blanket close. The candles are low. The story's over. Sleep well, little pharaoh, and dream of golden eyes in the dark.